public sees us now, so... All right. Right, we can go now. Very well. Those in favour of adopting the proposition kindly show.
We have the appel, please.
The appel is called for. Invite members to return to their seats. Ask the greffier to open the voting. Members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. Ask the greffier to close the voting. The proposition has been adopted. 40 votes for, no votes contra, no abstentions. The next item of public business is the draft Consumer Protection Unfair Practices Jersey Law, P130 of 2017, lodged by the Minister for Economic Development, Tourism, Sport and Culture, and I ask the greffier to read the citation.
A law to confer protection on consumers against unfair commercial practices, to create offences of contravening the prohibitions against such practices, and to impose penalties for those offences, to confer powers to investigate instances of alleged unfair commercial practices, and to require undertakings to restrict such practices and for connected purposes. The States, subject to the sanction of Her Most Excellent Majesty and Council, have adopted the following law.
Minister.
Thank you, sir. Deputy Norton will be acting as rapporteur for this item.
Deputy.
Thank you very much indeed, sir. As the Assistant Minister with Economic Development with specific responsibility for consumer protection, I'm delighted to be the rapporteur for this eagerly awaited and, may I say, essential new consumer protection law. In the words of just 3 key organisations within our community on this subject, 1, consumers deserve the valuable protection this law will bring. 2, businesses who operate in a fair and transparent manner will be afforded the surety of competing on a level playing field. And 3, the principles on which this law is based seem to be entirely appropriate and serve to enshrine what we consider to be good standard practice for the benefit of consumers and businesses alike. I'd like at this point just to thank some members who have given of their time most generously in the scrutinising of the draft of this law. In particular, I'd like to extend my gratitude to the Deputy of St One and Senator Balash, who were instrumental about bringing the change in the introduction of this protection from regulation to primary legislation. I'd also like to thank the Residential Properties Transactions and Economic Affairs Scrutiny panels, who have both received briefings and shown genuine interest in what this protection has to offer to all consumers. Finally, I'd like to extend my thanks also to the Deputy of St John, who engaged with myself and with the Director of Consumer Affairs and Trading Standards to fully familiarise herself with this draft law. If I can start by giving members a little bit of background into this legislation. When first implemented in the UK, it was said to be the biggest shake-up of consumer protection in 4 decades, since the introduction of the Trade Description Act, actually back in 1968. So to coin some words earlier today from the Chief Minister about this being a historic day, it is for another piece of legislation as well. This is extremely important. It repeals 23 laws, simplifies and modernising the UK consumer protection framework. It is now well established in the UK. It's established because it's utilised by trading standards authorities throughout the UK, it's harmonised across the entire European community, and it seeks to prevent business practices that are unfair to consumers. In short, these are consumer laws which are enjoyed by 500 million consumers across Europe and the UK, but not here in Jersey. So what does this law actually mean for Jersey? Public consultation resulted in unanimous support, sir, with 2 main themes being identified and maintained. Firstly, local businesses wanted regulation that would be uniform throughout the EU, as I've just mentioned, so it was easier for them to market and sell their goods and services throughout other jurisdictions, complying with one single set of rules. We have therefore not departed from the principles contained within the Unfair Commercial Practices Directive. This is particularly important in respect of the 31 banned practices. There is also the added benefit to give consumers greater confidence to buy from Jersey, providing a high common standard of consumer protection. Jersey is and must be seen to be a good place to do business. Our colleagues in Guernsey have also consulted and are looking to implement similar controls in due course. Secondly, we didn't want to introduce burdens on businesses who we know trade fairly. This law will achieve this. It is not prescriptive in telling businesses what to do. If traders treat customers fairly, provide accurate and timely information, and exercise professional diligence, there is nothing they need do or change as a result of the implementation of this law. How does this law protect consumers? Well, it will for the first time introduce a list of 31 banned practices. These practices are unfair in all circumstances. Members will have had time to examine these, and I therefore don't propose going through all 31 banned practices. But I would say any attempt to modify that list would depart from the fundamental principle of one common set of rules. Suffice to say, some of these practices which I have provided examples for are being carried out here in Jersey, and this law will give trading standards the tools to bring these practices to an end. This is modern legislation fit for purpose and to address the future emerging unfair commercial practices. It works by introducing a number of important principles where businesses deal with customers. From a business perspective, traders should exercise professional diligence towards consumers in their field of activity. They should not mislead consumers by their actions or omitting information. They should provide information which is clear, unambiguous, intelligible, and timely, and they must not act in an aggressive manner. From a consumer's perspective, they should be empowered to make informed decisions, having confidence to rely on the information traders provide. Protection should be afforded at all stages of the engagement, from advertising and promotions through to sales and after-sales services. Consumers should never be subjected to aggressive practices, and they should not be targeted. They should be, the targeted and vulnerable targeted groups in our community should also be given additional protection due to age, physical or mental infirmity, or credulity. Trading standards will be authorised to enforce this law as part of their wider consumer portfolio. Traders allegedly found in breach of this law may be reported to the Attorney General for consideration of instigating criminal proceedings. If found guilty, the court could impose a fine of £10,000. Alternatively, they may be asked to enter into an undertaking to cease and desist the unfair commercial practice. This is seen as a quick and efficient alternative to bringing businesses into compliance. However, failure to comply can still result in a referral to the Attorney General. The Jersey Consumer Council and the Citizens' Advice have fully endorsed this new law. The Council said this law will bring much needed relief to consumers, honest traders and trading standards as the regulators. The Jersey Consumer Council is always championing transparency, and what EDTSC proposes will underpin this most important principle. The JCC works closely with trading standards, referring individual cases to the team, and we know the huge efforts and frustrations they go through trying to resolve complaints. There are cases where they just don't have the powers. This law will put this right. We're also pleased to see that there's a sensible alternative to prosecution which allows businesses to provide undertakings to stop any unfair practice immediately. The Chief Executive Officer of the Jersey Consumer Council went on to say, consumers deserve valuable protection. This law will bring it, and we give it our full support. The Chief Officer of Citizens' Advice said, I believe this legislation will be a great leap forward in terms of providing consumers with the level of protection that the UK and EU consumers have enjoyed for many years. Equally, businesses who operate in a fair and transparent manner will be afforded the surety of competing on a level playing field. Trading standards have been in discussion with a wide variety of business sectors in preparation for this. This includes telco providers, large and small retailers, online sellers, trade association representatives, including the Jersey Estate Agents Association, the Retail Development Group, as it was then, and the Jersey Chamber of Commerce. I'll finish with a quote from a letter we received from the Jersey Chamber of Commerce. Following informative and constructive discussions, the consensus of opinion, and indeed from previous discussions on the subject, Chamber members welcome, support and endorse, as well as embrace the proposals and principles contained within this proposition, which seem to represent good practice. They will serve to bring Jersey into line with standard consumer expectations. The Chamber then go on to say that whilst invariably well-intentioned, often new legislation serves to create an additional and sometimes inordinate administrative or financial burden on business owners, this, however, this particular proposition receives our wholehearted support, since the consumer protection law and the principles upon which they are based seem to be entirely appropriate and serve to enshrine what we consider good practice and benefit for consumers and businesses alike. So this is indeed high praise from many sectors of our community. I would like to go on record to express my thanks and praise to the Director of Consumer Affairs and Trading Standards, and indeed her predecessor, with whom I started this work back in 2014 and 15. They've both worked tirelessly on this. With the support of the Assembly today, this will be a good day for consumers. It will be good news for businesses who trade fairly, and it will be bad news for those who do not. So I commend these principles to the Assembly. Thank you.
Are the principles seconded?
Yes, sir.
Contact St John.
Thank you, sir. I congratulate the Assistant Minister and the Minister for bringing forward this vital legislation. Back in the 1980s, I lobbied states members to bring in precisely such consumer protection, but unfortunately it never took place. But it is here and hopefully will be approved today. Just on a lighter note, sir, I'm very pleased to see, I think it's Article 5, or number 5 in their protections. The consumer you must not lure a consumer into believing that they can buy a product at a price. There were two grocery stores on the opposite side of the road, and one put up a sign, butter, special offer, 50p a pound, to which the other one retaliated, butter, 45p a pound. The first grocery store retaliated saying, butter, 40p a pound. And the second grocer retaliated, 35p a pound. The first grocer, being extremely upset, marched across the road and said, how on earth can you sell butter at 35p a pound? He said, I don't, I'm always out of stock, but at least it gets the customers in here. These sort of sharp practices must stop. And I'm glad that at long last we have a proposition that is going to start to stop the end of these practices. I do have one issue, sir, and modern ways of living these days, much purchasing is taking place over the internet. And I would be interested to hear from the Assistant Minister just how he wishes to tackle that rather thorny problem. Otherwise, I urge members to support this. It is very, very long overdue, and I'm very grateful to the Assistant Minister for bringing it forward. Thank you, sir.
Does any other member wish to speak on the principles? Deputy Higgins.
Just very briefly, I welcome the legislation. It's been long overdue. Could the Assistant Minister tell us why it's taken so long to catch up with the UK and Europe? If you're doing it in 2014 and we're now 2018, it seems like an awful long time for a piece of legislation that's been well recognised and established.
Deputy St Mary.
Thank you, sir. I've been the beneficiary of two of the presentations to which the Assistant Minister referred, and I congratulate him and the Minister for bringing this to the States. My understanding is that it is anticipated that this legislation might act as a catalyst for the formation of various trade associations who will then bring forward codes of conduct which their members can then advise they are members of. Would the Assistant Minister please comment on that in his summing up and confirm whether that is his understanding of the situation from his consultations? Thank you.
Deputy St John. Yes, Deputy St John.
I thought you said Deputy St. Thank you, sir. I'd just like to put on record my thanks, actually, to the Assistant Minister and his officer, because they've been extremely helpful. Consumer protection, funnily enough, when I first came into the States, was one of the first things I remember picking up in terms of a consultation that went out in 2009. And I was very interested in it. And so I took the opportunity to read through the latest proposition on the table, and I thank the Assistant Minister and the Department for doing the work. But I'd like to ask, in all the answers to the questions that I asked, it referred to pricing practices, which I think is actually referred to in the proposition on page 9, about misleading actions. And it refers to traders having a responsibility for ensuring that their pricing practices do not mislead consumers and potentially breach the law. I don't know whether the Assistant Minister could explain how it will work or what it will mean in terms of traders charging UK VAT and our application of GST in Jersey, and what that means for the consumer and their ability to challenge businesses that are using that practice in Jersey, if they are at all. Thank you.
Deputy Mesnick.
Thank you, sir. Just very briefly to congratulate the Assistant Minister and his team on all of their hard work on this. I'd just like to see clarification from him in his summing up, if he could confirm whether this is red tape or blue tape.
Deputy Truscott.
I should declare I'm actually a local business owner, and my son actually runs our family firm. And we've been in business for some 25 years. I don't feel I'm conflicted here, because I really do feel this is producing a level playing field, but perhaps have your opinion.
No, I don't think you have any
No, I don't think so.
conflict.
Thank you,
This
sir.
is an interest you've shared with the last number of
Thank you,
people
that's
being
great.
interested in running businesses.
So I'd just like to endorse what Deputy Norton and his team have done here. I think it's an excellent piece of work, and it does actually produce a level playing field, which I think in retail, one, it is so tough out there. You are competing with the internet, and I do want to follow on from the Constable of St John's question that, you know, we need protection from the internet as well, and I don't mean from local providers that have an online presence. I'm talking about providers from the UK. So our level playing field, absolutely. I'm absolutely endorse this, and well done, Deputy Norton.
Does any other member wish to speak on the principles? Deputy Terdier.
Thanks, sir. One issue which I'm not sure would in practice be captured by this is the practice that we may have all been, not going to say lured in by, but have seen, is this, and nowadays of course you get constant sales, it's not just sales at a certain period of year, such as the market that shops are always having to compete for business, and let's say it's a 70% discount, so you see the big poster which says 70% discount, and it may have up to 70% discount, but the up to, for some reason, is in really small letters. I've never seen a massive up to with a 70% in the corner, for obvious reasons. And you go in similarly and you look at the clothes rail, let's imagine it's a clothes shop, and you can't find any single product on there which actually is discounted at 70%. I'm not sure if there ever were any that were 70% discounted, or if they just sold like hotcakes, obviously. Now, you could argue that this would be captured by band practice number 5, which says you must not lure a customer into believing that they can buy a product at a price when you already know that you can't supply that product. It says that you know that you can't supply that product. Of course, they probably wouldn't know that because they do it in good faith, saying, well, when I started a month ago, when the sale started, there were at least 2 dresses on here amongst the 100 that were at 70%. The rest were at 10% discount. But they've gone, but I've not really checked. I don't check these things every day. I'm too busy battling government red tape to count dresses on my clothes rail. And then the next part of 5 says, or have limited availability, and you haven't made the customer aware of this. Well, clearly in any sale like that, you probably would have limited availability. That's the nature of a sale, especially a clearance sale. And I don't know in reality whether this is going to solve that kind of problem. If you read the interpretation of that, somebody comes and makes a complaint to Trading Standards and says, well, I looked on this rail, there were no clothes at 70%, there weren't even any at 50%, the best discount I could get is 30%, and that's a misleading proposal. And it seems to me that there should be some kind of rule around about how many products. So if you have a sale on and you're advertising a particular discount, there should be a minimum number of items that you are selling, and there should also perhaps be an average. It shouldn't just be taken about what the one item out of 100 that you're selling is discounted at. It should be about what the general sale price of those groups of items are. So I wait to see whether this is going to make any real difference and whether it's red tape or blue tape. But it's nice to see that this government is bringing regulation into place on small businesses, and it's not red tape, but it's just it's proportionate regulation, which will make a difference. And I suppose the other question for the Minister is it going to bring down prices? Is VAT still going to be charged in Jersey under this? That seems to be one of the biggest cons that exists in Jersey. It's been raised for years. Deputy Higgins raised it. Senator Rose have said he'd solve it, like he'd solve all of Jersey's problems. Still waiting. Will people still be able to charge VAT? And if not, why isn't this going to be solved by this proposition?
Deputy Simpson.
Thank you, sir. And I also congratulate the Assistant Minister and Minister on bringing in this legislation, putting it before us today for discussion, and I'm grateful to the Assistant Minister who asked me to review an early draft, and I was pleased to be able to provide some comments as somebody who had some limited practice in law in that area. Not that the legal profession generally got involved a great deal with consumer disputes, because of generally the value of the items did not justify that, except perhaps sometimes some new cars that were bought and that went wrong, and it's a substantial enough purchase for somebody to go and see their lawyer. But in many respects, these issues were resolved through Trading Standards or citizens' advice, and I think we must give credit to those two organisations for fighting for the consumer the best they could, but they were fighting really with one arm tied behind their back because our legislation was not up to date. So try as they might, and they got results when they could, but we have known for a long time that we could do better in the area of consumer legislation, and we are now, if we are able to pass this law. But it's an example, again, of Jersey having to play catch-up in an area of social legislation, when all around us, jurisdictions all around us, have got this body of law in place. So I am sure the legal profession would welcome this law, not because they expect to be dealing with cases, not at all, but because it provides clarity when questions arise. Previously, the legal profession would have had to address an issue on the basis of general contract law with the fundamental principle of caveat emptor, very little protection up front for the consumer. But now there will be greater clarity as a result of this law, and the clarity will also come from the body of case law which has been built up in Europe and in the United Kingdom, and it being the legislation in those jurisdictions being on a very similar basis, we would be able to make use of that case law. So it will be a great step forward for consumers in the island, and I can only welcome it and would urge the Assembly members to approve the proposition. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Wickenden.
Thank you, sir. I think this could be a good day to be remembered with the living wage proposition that we passed earlier, and we can get the consumer protection law in. It's going to be a good day. We don't have many of them sometimes. I'd like to congratulate the Assistant Minister, his team and pretty much everyone that's been involved in getting this to where it is today. It's much needed. Deputy Taddier commented that the biggest misinformation is VAT. I want to ask the Deputy, does this, or the Assistant Minister, does this protect us from the travel agencies that tell us that we can travel to Canada for £399, but when you get there you also have to realise that you've got to get off the island first. And then, I mean, it's island life and we're all very lucky to live in an island as beautiful as we have here today. But does this mean that travel agents will have to tell us what the actual price is rather than the price from the UK to the where you want to go rather than from Jersey to where we want to go? Thank you.
Is there any other member who wish to speak on the principles? Deputy Andrew Lewis.
So just briefly, sir, members will be aware that a group of us are currently reviewing property law, and one of the things that's come up a great many times, Deputy of St Wan's involved with this, Constable of St Martin and the Deputy of St Mary, and we're about to publish a report into elements that stray into consumer protection in terms of property transactions. So I'd like the Assistant Minister to perhaps elaborate on where that might affect people's rights as a property purchaser or seller, because this is the biggest transaction that any consumer is ever likely to make in their lives. So I think it's an extremely important part of protection. Now, in the report that we're about to present, we'll be making some recommendations for the Chief Minister to consider, which scrapes around the area of consumer protection, but I don't see a lot in here that is specifically about that type of transaction, because it is, like I say, a very, very big transaction, perhaps the biggest any of us will ever make. So I wondered if, in the future, is this law likely to go a bit further to cover that area, or does the Assistant Minister feel that there's sufficient within this legislation that will more than assist the process of buying and selling property, albeit there may need to be some changes to conveyancing law as well, sir, which is being looked at, and recommendations will be coming forward very shortly. Thank you, sir.
Does any other member wish to speak on the principles? Go on, Deputy Norton, to respond.
Thank you, sir, and thank you to everybody who has commented and asked questions. Start with the Constable St John and his slippery story of butter. I appreciate your comments, and yes, that is exactly one of those practices where you can advertise computers for £200 and you go there and they're no longer available at that price, and it's something that's happened to many people, I'm sure, at one time or another, because they never had any in the first place. And it's about them never having them in the first place. If they, of course, have sold out, that's another thing, but they've got to prove that they have actually did have some and they did make those sales. And sales records will be able to show that. And I think a degree of common sense has to come in on some of that, but I thank his comment. With regard to the internet, this does cover the internet as well. This does cover it. Distance selling also covers some of it, but the idea that being able to cover the EU and the UK, were you to buy something from the UK from any trader, were you to buy something from the EU, it is where that transaction took place. And trading standards are very well versed in talking to their counterparts throughout the EU and throughout the UK. And that is where the offence would have been committed, should there have been offence, and this law will enable that to be covered off. Deputy Higgins asked, why has it taken so long? And it's an extremely good question, and one I'm delighted to give a little bit of an answer to, if I may, and I'll try my best to paraphrase this, sir, and not keep you too long. But the EU directive came in 2000, and in fact I'll try and read it from the timeline I've got so I don't get any errors in here. The EU directive came out in 2005 and became law in the UK in 2008. We implemented an ambitious but deliverable portfolio of consumer protection legislation. Back in 2006, Consumer Safety Jersey Law. 2007, the Distance Selling Law. 2008, the Price Marking Controls. 2009, the Supply of Goods and Services Jersey Law. 2009 to 2016, there was laws associated with the regulation of protection for children from the supply of cigarette lighters, refill canisters, e-cigarettes and associated products. And in 2011, the new law on intellectual property rights, enabling trading standards to stamp out the supply of R4 cards, amongst many other things. So where were we in the middle of all of this? We did try very, very hard to get drafting time at one point. From 2010 to 2011, before my time, we went out to consultation on the new consumer protection laws. We continually failed to bid to get law drafting time at some of that time. In 2014, law drafting instructions were given to the Law Draftsman's Office. In October 2015, we lodged the EU legislation, what the UK now uses, for the Consumer Protection Unfair Practices Jersey Regs 201. In January of 2016, the Council of Ministers withdrew that in favour of primary legislation, and some of that was due to Senator Balash and to the Deputy of St. Juan and others who had expressed concern about that being an EU directive and wanting it in primary law, and rightly so. So from January 2016, when we withdrew that, this was then rewritten into primary law. That was then lodged in 2017. December of 2017, and that is what we are debating today, was when it was lodged. So there is the timeline for you that gives you some idea, and you can imagine, if you like, some of the frustration that that has had with trading standards over 2 directors trying to bring this forward, and it's been since 2008 onwards. In terms of this being blue tape or red tape, I could say it's white tape. I'd certainly say it is transparent tape. To use a trade word, it's sellotape. You can see right through it. You know exactly what it is, and it makes everything transparent for traders, and it makes everything transparent for consumers. It's a level playing field. It does cover online, as I've suggested, and we will be encouraging and supporting codes of practice that show us what good looks like under due diligence. And there are many codes of practice that have been used that formed the EU directive and used in the UK directive. And when we talk about the UK and us matching the UK, can I just say we're not catching up with the UK on this. They may have the EU directive, but of course, following Brexit, there will be the Great Repeal Bill, and when that happens, they will be actually moving from the EU directive to their own legislation, what we are already doing today. So in actual fact, they'll be following us, which is rather nice. Let's see if I've missed out anything. Deputy Taddier, you're absolutely right about the up to. The up to is covered, and in fact it's covered in some ways under the pricing practice, and so is VAT for that matter. This does not address VAT, as the price is actually the price. If anyone claims they're charging you VAT, then they are breaking the law, because there is no VAT here. If they choose to sell something at £100 and not £85, or £83, 17%, or £80, that is up to them to charge what they charge. They cannot charge it and say, this includes VAT, because we don't have VAT. They're just simply choosing to charge something at £100 when they could have charged it at £80. So I do take the point. It is a difficult one because it is VAT, where we'd see it as the VAT equivalent. But it is simply someone charging the price. The price is the price. Whatever the trader decides they want to make their competitive price. I don't particularly like it more than anyone else likes it, because that's the price they charge in the UK. But that is up to the trader. If they want to be uncompetitive, there is little we can do to price control them on that. Were they to advertise this as VAT, then we would have some concerns. And just because they charge it including VAT in the UK does not mean we can have any action on it. So it does not cover that. So I'm afraid, I hope that answers that question. If they're making a claim about being VAT free and they're charging the same price as they're charging the UK, then we do have, because they are then misleading. The guide on pricing practices addresses the up-to claim in shop windows. It's more likely that they would be caught under the misleading or omissions part of this law. But again, that is going to depend entirely on whether there were any goods that were ever for sale at 70% less. Now, if they can't prove that they ever sold anything 70% less from their sales records, then they're clearly luring people in under false pretense. If, on the other hand, they did have a whole rail of whatever it was at 70% and they've sold out, then that is another issue. Should they be continuing to advertise up to 70% off if they've got nothing left? That will be down to trading standards to say that you're being unreasonable now. You only had one of these in, and that was unfair. But it does give trading standards the teeth to be able to go into these premises and say, we have got laws. Up till now, this has been persuasion. Please don't do this. And have they had people come back to them and say, why not? There's no law in Jersey? Yes, they have. Trading standards deal with 1,000 complaints per year. These are complaints and inquiries about consumerism. 1,000. So they are well versed in dealing with this, and unfortunately, as somebody has already said, they have their arm tied behind their back. I think if I haven't mentioned somebody's there, I do apologise. I'm trying to get through. Deputy Truscott was absolutely right. It is a level playing field, and I thank him for his comments as well. And with the codes of conduct, I think we've answered that with the Deputy of St Mary as well. And I do hope that this is the beginning. Members can be reassured. If there are changes to EU legislation or there are changes to the new UK legislation, which we are matching, then we can always come back to the States and bring amendments to this so that we can continue to match. But we've needed to catch up for some time, and that's where we are now. So I hope I've answered members' questions. I thank them very much indeed for their comments. There was a question from Deputy Lewis of St Helier with regard to estate agents. Yes, we are looking to encourage and look at other areas that we can extend this out to, and that refers to very much where we can come back to the States in the future. This is about getting what we need to have right now underway, and then looking at additions to that when we can get there. And with regard to flights, I think there has to be clear advertising, as there is in the United Kingdom, and if travel agents are using advertising from the United Kingdom but not saying it's from the United Kingdom, then I'm sure the officers from Trading Standards will be having a word with them about their advertising, because it covers advertising, it covers sales, and it covers after sales as well. So I maintain the proposition and I call for the appel. Thank you.
So as a point of clarification, it may be a question for the Attorney General, given the, I think the rapporteur may have said something incorrect, and it's just to clarify. He said that if a business says that no VAT is charged here, but they do charge VAT, they wouldn't be allowed to do that. But it seems to contradict what he said previously, that the price is the price. So, for example, a UK high street chain, which also has a presence in Jersey, could legitimately say no VAT charged here, but charge exactly the same price as the UK, because they're simply charging the same price as the UK, no VAT, but 20% extra for shipping. Is that not the case, that you can legitimately claim to not charge VAT, and they presumably do that for marketing purposes for tourists, but essentially VAT doesn't exist in Jersey?
Is that a question that you're asking the Attorney, or would you like...
Probably to the Attorney General, I think so.
Attorney, are you able to assist?
Well, so the Deputy, of course, is right that VAT cannot be charged in Jersey, as there's no such tax in this island. In relation to a claim that VAT had been taken away when it hadn't, then that would be a misleading commercial practice under Article 4, because there would have been false information under Article 4.2 in respect of an element listed at 4.3. And 4.3e refers to the price or the manner in which the price is calculated. But if there were circumstances in which a trader claimed to remove VAT, but nonetheless said that there were additional costs which came to about the same sum, that would be a matter which would need to be examined with care to see if the representation made was in fact misleading or not.
Just further question, so if, of course, they don't say VAT has been removed, but they just say no VAT charged here, there's nothing really that Trading Standards can do, because it's simply a tax that doesn't exist in Jersey, and they're stating a truism under the law.
Yes, that's correct.
Very well, the appel has been called for. I'd like members to return to their seats. Ask the greffier to open the voting. The vote is on the principles of this piece of legislation. If members have had the opportunity of casting their votes, I ask the greffier to close the voting. The principles have been adopted. 44 votes pour, no votes contre, no abstentions. Deputy Breed, does your Economic Affairs Scrutiny Panel wish to call this in?
No, sir, we do not.
Very well. Then, Deputy Norton, how do you wish to deal with the articles?
I'd like to take them en bloc, please, if I may, sir.
Very well. So you're proposing the articles en bloc. Presumably, we'll ask answer any questions.
Happy to if I can, sir.
Articles proposed en bloc. Are they seconded? Yes, sir. Does any member wish to speak on any of the articles? If no member wishes to speak, all those in favour of adopting the articles en bloc, kindly show. Those against? The articles are adopted. Do you wish to deal with the matter in third reading?
Please, sir. En bloc.
And is the statute seconded in third reading? Yes, sir. Does any member wish to speak in third reading?
Yes, sir.
Yes, Senator Farr.
Can I just add my thanks to Deputy Norton, thanks to the officers of the department, but also I'd like to specifically thank Deputy Norton, who has worked incredibly hard on this, and I think the comprehensive nature of the way he dealt with the very good questions just demonstrates the grasp and knowledge he has of the subject, sir. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak in third reading? Deputy, do you wish to respond to that? Technically, you can.
I'd rather not, if you don't mind, sir, but thank you very much indeed. And again, I reiterate my thanks to the officers who really have been the tour de force behind this. Thank you very much to all members.
Very well. Those in favour of adopting the articles in third reading?
The appellate.
The appellate is called for. On the assumption all members are back in their seats, I ask the referee to open the voting. If members have had the opportunity of casting their votes, I ask the referee to close the voting. The law has been adopted in third reading, 42 votes pour, no votes contre, no abstentions.
So can I just add thanks to the Deputy and say it'd be good to have something similar for all politicians and candidates in the election. It would have made more sense had I said it during my speech, but if you read the...
So we all just...
blog about it.
Yes. I think the essence of comedy is timing, and we'll leave it there.
Touché.
We now come on to the draft machinery of government miscellaneous amendments, Jersey Law 2001, brought by the Chief Minister. I ask the greffier to read the citation.
A law to amend further the Public Finances Jersey Law 2005, the States of Jersey Law 2005, and related legislation. The State, subject to the sanction of Her Most Excellent Majesty and Council, have adopted the following law.
Chief Minister.
Thank you, sir. Politics can be a tricky business, sir. There's the to and fro of political debate. There's dealing with issues, and from time to time there is playing the person, and that all goes with anyone who puts themselves forward for political office. With that, sir, sometimes comes confusion. Where does the job of a politician, a member of this assembly, a minister, and the civil service, where does the political start and stop, and where does the role of officials start and stop? And we have seen, sir, I think, particularly during 2017, some very difficult reports which have drawn that question into sharp relief. the Innovation Fund work that the Controller and Auditor General undertook, and then the review into ministerial government in that regard, and then, of course, later in the year, the inquiry report. Where does one start? Where does one stop? And how does the machinery of government deliver one government running efficiently and effectively for islanders, which is responsible to ministers and to this assembly? In a word, sir, how do we remove the silo mentality and structure which frustrates members day in and day out in their representation of their constituents? Sir, I find it frustrating. Maybe I come home from work and my wife says that her friend was talking to her about the problems in health. Another might have referred to the problems that they were encountering in education. Islanders that contact me and say they've gone to one department and they've been told it's not their responsibility, it's the responsibility of another department. So the office that I am honoured to act in currently, obviously, as you would expect, sir, has a number of correspondence on a daily basis. Those particular cases and questions might get referred out to departments for an opinion or for an answer. It might be that the official in the department provides the answer. It might be that the minister provides the answer. So that takes, as a general observation, far too long. Some departments answer straight away within 24 hours and they can be dispatched to the constituent. Others, sir, take weeks, if not months. But even I, sir, even I, this week on return from holiday, was disappointed, I'll say, to receive a response from one department in answer to an islander's legitimate and heartfelt questions, that in that draft answer of information, the reply had come from that department to the Chief Minister that it was not their responsibility and that I should go and ask somebody else in a different department. That was answer to the question A. Question B, they provided a bit of an answer. Question C, they provided a bit of an answer. Question D, yet again, was, well, we don't know the answer to this. You need to, and we're not sure who will. So it's not good enough. I am tired and fed up of saying it's not good enough. It's letting islanders down, sir. It's a government, it's an institution which is focused upon itself and serving its own ends and not focusing upon islanders that we are here to serve and those employed by this assembly, for that's what they are in an institution that has forgotten its raison d'etre, and that is to serve islanders. We should not hear emanating from any department, it's not my responsibility. We are called to serve. We are employed to serve. And there should be an appropriate separation between policy and strategy and delivery. So I didn't always look at social media, but this morning someone kindly posted on Twitter that what was I doing changing the responsibility for children's services to the Chief Executive Officer. Could I not do the job? Could I not do the job that islanders were paying me for? And this, sir, is at the heart of some of the confusion. That operational matters should be undertaken by officials, and this Assembly and islanders should hold them to account. The problem is, sir, no one is sure who is accountable for what or who is responsible for what. It's not good enough. This is why, sir, I bring forward these proposals to create proper accountability structure and to remove the silos from government. I know, sir, that for some change is a challenge. I know, sir, that some would like the care inquiry to have been simply about historic abuse, and that it was. But it was also about how government is failing islanders and the way we are structured. And that, sir, was also the confusion at the heart of the innovation review. Who was responsible for what, where? And how were they held to account? Now, sir, I understand scrutiny's concern about this change. I'm obviously a little disappointed that their view was that if we went ahead with the principles, we should kick the principles out. I'd ask them, sir, and I look to the chairman of that panel, I'd ask them to consider they may in their work have areas of the principles, because many members have come to me and said they're not sure about this principle or they'd like to see an amendment, articles, they're not sure about this one and they'd like to see an amendment and a refinement to this one. That's what that process between now and us then coming back to debate the articles should be and is all about. Today, sir, I want and I hope that members will see that this is about removing the silo mentality, creating an accountability structure to deliver services efficiently, effectively for islanders, and holding officials rightly to account. And we can only hold those officials to account if we give them the authority to actually deliver those services in a joined up and effective and efficient way. So I know that within these core principles of removing the silo mentality and creating a proper accountability structure, I put in one or two other things as well, which I think has got some members terribly excited, and that is whether the next Chief Minister should have the ability to carry out a reshuffle. I happen to think they should, sir. But if members think they shouldn't, and that is their stumbling block, then when we come to the article, sir, I ask them that will be the time to vote against that particular article. And it might be that as we go through this scrutiny process, and scrutiny come forward with good solid reasons why that particular element shouldn't be taken forward at this time. I will listen, sir. I will absolutely listen. The collective responsibility, up until recently, so it seems to me that there has been a fixation about this single element. Whereas, to my mind, this is one of the smaller parts of these proposals. But it will, by removing the collective responsibility, it will enhance that accountability. It will allow government to work together, but publicly say where they disagree with the Council of Ministers and why. It will allow ministers to come to this assembly and say, you know what? The Council of Ministers haven't given me a big enough budget to deliver on the priorities of the assembly, and I need more staff to do this or the other. So I find it frustrating that member after member of this assembly and members of the public say that government is not functioning well and on their behalf, and that we're not running as efficiently, that we've got duplication, that we're being told one thing by the right hand and another thing by the left hand. But when it comes to making these difficult changes, we sometimes struggle to do that, sir. So in moving the principles today, sir, I do ask that members support that principle of creating a proper accountability structure where officials are accountable for delivery of what this assembly and ministers want, and government works across functions and not in a silo mentality where somebody else is responsible and it's nothing to do with them. Members that want to stand for election and suggest, sir, that there's more efficiencies that can be delivered in government, that money can be saved in some areas of government, that we're too top-heavy with management, they need to vote for this principle, sir. Because if we keep the current silo mentality, they will not be able, with a straight face, sir, to say that they want to see the culture changed, that they want to see efficiencies driven forward, unless they're prepared to make some difficult decisions. So the day for the debate on whether this article about the principal accounting officer, the article about the single government, the article about reshuffling, the article about collective responsibility, the article about transfers, that's for the time when we get to the articles, because I know that scrutiny rightly want to do their work. And I'm looking forward to attending upon them next week and having a robust debate, as we have had. I've spent 3 years, sir, being criticised by them. Why are you not changing the culture quicker, Chief Minister? Why didn't you take an extra 30 million out of the departmental budgets on the MTFP because of all the duplication? I ask them, sir, to remember that, because they are the right questions that proper accountability structure, proper structure of government will allow for. But today is the principle. Do we want to remove silo working? Do we want to have a proper accountability structure for officials? Or do we want the confusion, the duplication, the waste to continue? I know which I want. I actually think that my good colleagues and friends on the scrutiny panel want the same. By agreeing the principles today and then working on the articles together and refining them and amending them, if that's appropriate, in a month's time, I think that will serve our island well. Now is the time to change the machinery of government, not after the next election and leave it for another year where new people who are elected can say, well, let's just see how it settles in. Well, it's not quite that bad. They're a good person. We know that they're going to run their department well. That's not the time to do it. Now is the time, before an election, so that every candidate can stand before the public and say, we think that we've made improvements that are going to speed up decisions, improve accountability, rationalise and drive efficiencies. I think that's what Islanders want, sir. And that's why I make this, that's why I present these principles to the Assembly, sir. Thank you.
Very well. Is the principle seconded? Yes. Does any member wish to speak on the principles? Deputy Taddy?
Thank you, sir. The expression "a sledgehammer to crack a nut" is used and has been used by some people. And if we look at that nut, the idea is the sense that the nut is government and everything that is associated with it. It's already broken, that's what we're being told by the Chief Minister. And that actually mistakes like the Innovation Fund, and that's only one that he's talked about. Of course, there are a whole litany of mistakes which the Chief Minister could have spoken about that come under his administration in the last 6 years. Apparently it's not their fault, it's just because the system's not quite right and we need to change it. Well, I'm afraid that doesn't wash for me, and that doesn't wash for most members of the public, I suspect. Whether it comes to things like a failed immigration policy that they're very good at talking about, and they have been for the last few years, and especially at election time, but they're completely unable, for whatever reason, to deliver. Whether it's to tackle and find solutions to the very real problems that we've talked about only in the last few days in this island, to do with housing, to do with the cost of living, to do with, let's look at education, health department. Is it a structural problem that we haven't got a hospital? We still don't know, after 4 years down the line from having a health minister who said, I'll sort things out in 100 days. We don't even know really, in our heart of heart, whether the hospital is even going to go on that site. We don't know how long it's going to take to build, and we don't know how much money it's going to cost. We don't know where the new health tax for the running of the hospital is going to come from. We don't know what it's going to look like. Is that a structural problem to do with the fact that we haven't got it quite right and that we need to maybe talk about whether or not we have collective responsibility or give more power to a chief executive? Or is it the fact that this Council of Ministers in their current format have been completely incompetent? Is it that they've been politically ineffective, they've been politically incompetent, they've been politically divided, and that they are now politically moribund only a couple of months away from an election? I'd suggest that it is actually the latter, not the former. And they're trying to distract, quite rightly. I mean, there's been some great political acrobatics and buck passing in the last year over the Innovation Fund. Was it his fault? Was it his fault? Who's to blame? The Chief Minister asks his friend and ally to step aside to take the blame. He's not very happy about it because he thinks it's the other minister's fault or it's his fault. But actually, it was just a systemic fault. It's the Assembly's fault because they're the ones that agreed the principles that were set up and the checks and balances around that fund weren't quite right. The public are looking at it, and they've got unparliamentary words for this, which we can't say in this Assembly. We might call it a mess-up. They might use other anatomically charged words and phrases. And that's the reality out there, and that's what they're thinking. And this esoteric argument that we're having today is really another way, I think, people out there saying, what on earth are they talking about? It's just because the current lot are incompetent. They don't know what they're doing. The Chief Minister may be well-intentioned. And if I met someone last night, and when he heard I was a politician, I didn't tell him. Somebody introduced me as a politician. Thank you very much for that, having a nice night out at the Arts Centre. This guy's a politician. and he says, oh, I know a joke about politicians. It's like, what's the difference between a politician and a second-hand car salesman? He says, at least a politician knows, at least a second-hand car salesman knows when he's lying. And that's obviously the joke I should have said earlier, which is why I said I think we need a code of conduct for states members about misleading product placement, etc. You know, can you actually back up the product you're trying to sell? Can politicians back up what they're selling to the electorate, and will they actually deliver on it? And I think the Chief Minister is genuine in this. I think he genuinely believes that the fault does not lie with him or his Council of Ministers. I think he believes it's a structural problem. And I have some sympathy for the Chief Minister. He wanted a system. He knows we exist in a non-party political system for the main, yet he wants to have the best of both worlds. He wants to be able to have a Council of Ministers which basically deliver his policy for him, but he wants the privilege in the Jersey way to remain an independent. And he wants all of the Council of Ministers, whether they're senators or deputies with the occasional constable thrown in as an assistant minister, to be able to say, I'm an independent, but we'll all work in the best interests of Jersey. And that's the fundamental problem, of course, which he won't yet recognise. Maybe he'll form his party. The clock's ticking. I think we've only got a couple of months now till nomination night, so that the public can actually have that full disclosure and know what they're buying. Put a brand on your politics and know what will be delivered. And the way I see it, it's quite simple, whether it's in Jersey or elsewhere. The civil service are there to do the bidding of the politicians, and it's the politicians who must set the political direction. They say, this is what we want to achieve, go away and do that, please. And the problem is, for decades, that's never happened because we haven't had any real political direction. The only political direction has been keep business ticking along, keep the money pouring in, we can't spend it fast enough. But unfortunately, in the last 5 to 10 years, there's been a complete game changer with that. And that's why people look back with rose-tinted glasses at the committee system saying, oh, it was much better in the good old days when they weren't paid, when they used to sit around, they used to scrutinise decisions, and then they used to have votes of no confidence in each other, and then somebody else was re-elected. And actually, it's still probably the same few people doing the work. In fact, it was really the civil service running the show, again, in the absence of any political direction. And the real broken system is that the public out there have no way of connecting and structuring the assembly, let alone the government that they want to see. So they can have their 4 votes plus 8 for senator if they live in St Helier number 3 and 4. If they live in one of the dark parishes, as I call them, they might get 1 seat for election, which they don't get a say on. And then, of course, they can vote for 8 senators. They've got no idea who's going to make up that government, and even less idea about what the policy direction that they get. Does the person who stands up and say, I support the elderly, I support health, I support education, these kind of anodyne, motherhood and apple pie, meaningless statements, and then actually might as well just roll the dice and see what you get in here, who's done the best deal before and during the elections to secure their friends in the dark halls of power, the corridors of power. That's how the current system works. And if the Chief Minister is serious about fixing it, of course, there might be some things that need to be tweaked. Of course, the silo mentality needs to change. And I think what's interesting here, and it'll be interesting to hear the debate that goes on, the problem is the Chief Minister wanted to enforce collective responsibility in law and standing orders. That's something that should be done by the Chief Minister in the Council of Ministers. Reform Jersey, for example, or any other party that comes out in the future. We don't need to enforce our discipline in standing orders. We do it ourselves. We have conversations. We say, what are the policies we want to pursue? What do you think is going to work? What are the things that are a priority? And the Council of Ministers should be working in the same way. You give the Chief Minister the power, and that's the position I've come round to now, is that we need to give the Chief Minister, or whoever he or she will be in the future, the power to pick a team around him, say, these are my people, and as long as they've got the acceptance of the Assembly, they carry on and they deliver the policy. And he or she is the one that we hold to account. If the Council of Ministers doesn't deliver, he's ultimately accountable. He faces the vote of no confidence. And that's what I'm concerned about. And too easy, of course, to criticise civil servants. People say we've got these highly paid civil servants who are politicised, making the decisions, and that's because, unfortunately, they've needed to do that. They've needed to step into the political breach often, and they've always been very professional, in my opinion. They always actually don't overstep the mark, but they're having to make political decisions because there's an absence and a void of political direction. That's the fundamental problem with our political system. And I'm not sure whether we're going to see any change. And I'm pretty sure if we had this new system 4 years ago, 8 years ago, we'd still see the same mistakes being made because it's the same people at the board. They don't have the same political direction. When you have a coalition of centre-right, right and far-right, who are all squabbling amongst themselves and then playing the blame game, of course you're not going to get anything meaningful. That's the real problem in Jersey. Give the public real choice, stand on a platform together, tell people what you want to do before an election, and then we can talk about what structural changes may need to be brought forward. But you simply cannot put all the ills and all the woes of the last 4 to 8 years at the fact that we don't quite have the right structure. No, it's time for this Council of Ministers to take stock of what they've done, to take responsibility, because certainly the public are going to want to have accountability, and they'll be doing so on the 16th of May.
Deputy Green.
Thank you very much, sir. Sir, I seek your permission to invoke my right as a States member under Standing Order 79 to propose a suspension of debate for purposes of scrutiny.
Standing Order 79 provides that any member of the Assembly may propose without notice the debate on any proposition be suspended, and the States request the relevant scrutiny panel to consider having the proposition referred to it. If the States agree to the proposal, the debate is then suspended until the following meeting, and at the next meeting the presiding officer asks the chairman of the relevant scrutiny panel whether or not he wishes to have the proposition referred to the panel. Very well. That seems to me any member can propose without notice. That seems to be entirely in order. And you are able to propose without notice? Sorry. Yes, he'll speak. So you need to make the proposition now, Deputy, that the matter be referred to scrutiny. If that proposition is seconded, there'll be a debate on it in the normal way.
Seconded, sir.
Yes.
Thank you very much, sir. I sought your permission in the first instance to ensure that I adhered to standing orders. The purpose of my proposition is very clear. It is to suspend the debate for the purposes of scrutiny. That is all I'm going to talk to in my proposition. I do not intend to talk to the rights or wrongs of what is being proposed, but merely that scrutiny has not been allowed by the Chief Minister to carry out its mandated function, a function mandated by this States Assembly to ensure that all members are fully informed and versed on the implications of any changes to legislation that are brought forward by a minister or the Council of Ministers. This proposition was lodged on the 8th of January. The Chairman's Committee, on which I sit, met very shortly afterwards to decide how are we going to handle this, because it actually does cover quite a broad range of things, and it didn't naturally fit with any one particular scrutiny panel, even though it had been brought by the Chief Minister, who normally would be scrutinised by the Corporate Services Panel. So it was decided by the Chairman's Committee to establish a specific review panel for this draft legislation, of which I am the chairman. So we had looked at the draft law, which the first we saw of it was on the 8th of January, and on the 25th of January we wrote to the Chief Minister advising him, firstly, of the establishment of the review panel, and secondly, that initial readings of the draft law led us to have concerns about the implications that were going ahead. The Chief Minister wrote back relatively quickly, saying that he was not going to allow us to have a deferral to the debate until the 20th of March, which is what we had requested. So we are left in a very difficult situation where the States Assembly is being asked by the Chief Minister to debate what he calls the principles, but it's actually the articles themselves, because we have not been allowed, really, to look at the implications of a whole range of things. Now, it must be understood that this particular draft legislation covers not only the creation of a principal accountable officer and subsequent accountable officers, which the Chief Minister refers to as breaking down the silos. It also refers to changes in the Public Finances Law, which enables the Minister for Treasury and Resources to make budget transfers between departments without any recourse other than to the Chief Minister and the Principal Accountable Officer. It also talks about the way in which ministerial government will be transformed, in a sense that the relationship between the Chief Ministers and his ministers and the Chief Minister or Council of Ministers and the States Assembly will be transformed. Irrespective of whether or not you agree with what the Chief Minister is proposing, if you support the role of scrutiny in the ministerial government system that we have, I would urge you to support the suspension of this debate and a referral back to scrutiny, because of the fact that scrutiny have not been allowed to carry out their role. And there are many questions that have been asked to us, not only by States members themselves, but many other people as well, as what is the implication of this article? What's the implication of that? And until we've actually had the opportunity to talk to the people involved in a public hearing situation, how can we report on what the implications are? The Chief Minister himself mentioned that the actual public hearing, the first public hearing of this scrutiny process, will be held on the 1st of March with the Chief Minister and the Chief Executive. And yet here we are today with the Chief Minister asking this Assembly to vote on the principle. Now that seems to be circumnavigating the scrutiny process. And that concerns me, that scrutiny is not being provided with the opportunity to actually scrutinise the principles and go, okay, what is the implication of this particular action, that particular action, so that States members, when you come to vote on this, will be fully informed of any possible implications or issues that may crop up. We are aware that there may need to be consequential changes to other legislation, and most certainly standing orders, as the Privileges and Procedures Committee has identified, should this particular draft legislation go ahead. So once again, surely States members would support scrutiny in its desire to actually provide States members with the relevant information that allows each and every one of us in this Assembly to make an informed decision. Irrespective of your views on whether it is right or wrong of what is being proposed, surely the point here is allow scrutiny to carry out its mandated role and then debate the principles and the articles with much more information at your fingertips. And therefore, sir, this is why I am making this proposal. Thank you, sir.
Is the proposition seconded? Yes. Does any member wish to speak? Deputy St John.
Thank you, sir. I stand because, with all due respect to Deputy Bree, I really do wish some states members would stop using scrutiny as an excuse, because the frustrating thing about this is legislation, and surely scrutiny want to hear other states members' points of view on the principles of this, what's happening, so that they can consider it alongside whether they scrutinise or not. I find this absolutely astonishing. It took 2 weeks to set up a review panel from the point of when this was lodged. The Corporate Services Panel would have been aware of this coming. The Care of Children Review Panel, who was set up, were aware of the strengthening of accountability and actually asked about who was going to be dealing with this particular scrutiny of legislation, because the Care of Children Panel, the reason why that was set up was because we wanted to ensure that the relevant policies and legislation that was coming out of the Council of Ministers, if the relevant scrutiny panel couldn't actually scrutinise it, the Care of Children Review would pick up that work because it was important that it was scrutinised. I'm sorry, sir, but could the proposer of this, moving this, explain to me what it is he wants to scrutinise on the principles, why it is he doesn't want to listen to other states members' views in an open, transparent, democratic debate in this state's assembly, and why it cannot be pulled by scrutiny after the principles of the debate. I'd just like to understand exactly why that is the case. And there are issues with some of the articles. I have issues with some of the articles. I've raised them with the Chief Minister, and I've spoken about it with other members. The last 2 terms, there have been successive reviews on machinery of government. There is a mountain of information out there about the problems we have with the way government works and the way government's structured. So I'd like the proposer to explain to me or answer those specific questions that I have, because I'm just slightly frustrated at the position where I'm doing various different scrutiny reviews as well. I'm having to find the time to get the work done because we believe it's important and a priority. There is some legislation that's come forward to the States Assembly that hasn't had a scrutiny report attached to it, which I thought was important, but I'm one person, I can only do so much. So I'd just like to understand why. Why can it not wait until we've had the discussion on the principles and then for it to go to scrutiny?
Deputy Sutherland.
No. I've been around for too long. But I'm staying, if I can. And I've seen this before, time and time and time again, from the lips of the likes of Senator Horsfall, Senator Walker, Senator LeSueur. It's only principles. And then when you see it again, it's actually fleshed out. And you've signed up to things you didn't ought to sign up to, on the grounds that all we're debating is the principles. Sorry, time and time again I've seen chief ministers and the equivalent come back and say, you voted on this, you accepted it, so we're ploughing ahead. No, that's the way. I've seen it too many times. And I don't think that this particular Council of Ministers is any better than any previous Council of Ministers on that regard. The fact is, a discussion in this chamber on the principles is meaningless until it's a vote. It's a vote on the principles, and as soon as you do that, Chief Minister can come back and say, you voted on this, you accepted it. Here we go. These are, it seems to me, significant and major changes which may have all sorts of implications if it comes through. We shouldn't be fooled into taking a in-principle debate, and that's okay. Because the likelihood is that the next time you'll see this, it'll be done and dusted, delivered on a plate. And there'll be things in there that you wish you hadn't voted for, which sounded okay at the time, but actually when you see it mapped out and the flesh put on the bones, you go, oh, don't want to touch it. That's horrid. That's the reality. Don't be fooled, please, Chamber.
Senator Routier.
Thank you, sir. As the previous speaker has said, that he's been around a long, long time, and probably I've been around as long as him. Probably, well, there'll be the same amount of stamping of feet. Perhaps I've been around too long. But he mentioned about the previous system of when Senator Horsfall around, when Senator LeSueur was around, when the principles were adopted and the articles came back. That was a different system completely then. Because now, with the introduction of scrutiny and within standing orders, as we know, the process is that we have the opportunity to debate the principles. As I share the Deputy St John's frustration about the process, what is being suggested now, and not having the opportunity to hear everybody's views about the way of the direction that the principles are suggesting. And then the scrutiny has every right, and which I expect them to do today. I mean, which I really think that is the right thing for them to happen, is for us to have a good debate about the principles. Let us have a good airing about that, and then come to a conclusion about whether we think that's the general direction we should be heading. And then scrutiny will have every opportunity to look at every article under the sun and add more and alter it, and we can get to a position where the articles come back to this assembly and are debated, and we get to a position where we can find a way forward. For just a brief mention about the general principles we're debating, there are times when I've been in places in trying to change services, where services have been established for a long, long time, and they've been there, and they've been doing the same thing over and over again, and it's all repeated because it's the way we do things all the time. It's a service which, I think about people with learning disabilities. There were things that people in my early days, they were in St Saviour's Hospital, who were receiving a service, but it was all revolved around the service providers. It was nothing about the client at all. And we had to change that completely. And that's what we need to do here. We need to focus on the people we are serving in our community, not on our existence, not on the civil servants' existence. It's about providing services to people. That's what needs to change. And as the Chief Minister said in his opening comments about the way that services are provided, when some departments aren't talking to each other and sharing experiences, and the public are writing to him to ask him, why can't you do such and such? Well, and he writes off to the departments and he gets a non-answer and saying it's another department's responsibility. That's just not good enough. We're failing people. So I urge members to let us have a good debate on the principles of this, and then scrutiny can then call it in and look at all the articles and change some of the articles and even bring new articles. That's what should happen, and that's what we've got the processes we have. That's what's in our standing orders. That's the way we should operate. I urge members to reject this desire to stop the debate now and let us continue to have the principal debate, and then for scrutiny to scrutinise the articles.
Deputy Noel.
So I rise in response to Deputy Southern. He has maybe a shorter memory than I do, because only just over a year ago we had an in-principle debate where this Assembly agreed to bring in waste charges. That wasn't rubber stamped. That wasn't automatically got through the book, sir. So this Assembly decided that they wanted to defer those proposals, so that my department and I brought back to the Assembly last summer. I completely agree with my colleague on my right, the Deputy St John's. It is appropriate that members and scrutiny panel members hear the opinions of members this afternoon and then make a decision whether or not to scrutinise. I'm sure that they will call it in if we do manage to debate the principles, sir. And it's their right. And just like my colleague Senator Routier just said, for them to look at the detail, for them to bring back changes, and they have the time to do that, sir. So I can't support this moving on.
Deputy Wickenden.
Thank you, sir. Well, I know I'm very young in this Parliament, in this assembly. I've only been here for almost one term, but almost every report that I've seen come across, maybe from the CNAG or other places, the Innovation Review, has always talked about the need for the culture change in this organisation for us to move forward and provide the services that the people of Jersey expect us to provide. We've had, I think, the fundamental spending review, the comprehensive spending review, public sector reform. We still haven't managed to make those changes, and I'm so happy that we're bringing forward something now that talks about creating not departments but service-based organisation, a service-based organisation. It's absolutely right that we do it. It shouldn't be siloed. The word silo comes in again in nearly all of those reports. Let's have, I've spoken to many members within this assembly, and I think everyone's got a view on this changes that need to be made or that's being proposed. Let's hear what they are. Let's have, let scrutiny have an informed decision from this assembly when they scrutinise it. And we can only do that in the principles. It's absolutely important that we all get to say what we feel about the articles, about what we feel about the changes that need to be made. Do they go far enough? Do they not? Are we making changes for a future assembly too early? Should it be their decision? We need to have this discussion around this assembly before scrutiny comes in, because it will only strengthen scrutiny's report if they know what the feeling of the representatives of this island are. I do have a question for the Deputy who has raised this, which is he sits on two panels right now. He's on the Corporate Services Scrutiny Review and he's the Chairman of the Economics Scrutiny Panel. Does he have capacity to look at this is one of my concerns. Currently in Corporate Services, they've got a review outstanding for since the 8th of August on external relations policy, and over 13 months ago on the licensing law. We haven't seen the reports on that. It's months and months and months that clearly is very, very busy. Otherwise, we would have the reports now. Will the Deputy let me know that he has the capacity to review this, please? Thank you.
Deputy Tadier.
Thank you, sir. I have some sympathy with where my colleague Deputy of St John is coming from, but I come to a different conclusion when hearing the arguments. The first point to make is that it's not as if the scrutiny panel has just popped up today saying, out of the blue, saying we want to scrutinise the principles. They've actually had a conversation with the department and the minister saying, look, we've got concerns not just with the articles, but with the principles, and therefore we would like to scrutinise it. Now, it might be a different argument if this had been on the table as a proposition since, let's say, September, but it hasn't. It's called P1 2018, which means it was lodged as the first item this year. We don't get back to sit until the middle of January, and then, of course, there's a half-term break, which not everyone takes, but generally there's some disruption in the first few 2 months of the calendar year. And so we're told this is such an urgent piece of work, which I'm sure the Council of Ministers do prioritise it, but they prioritise it so much that they put it at the very end, scheduled for a debate less than 2 months before the election starts. No chance for scrutiny. So even if it does get pulled in to look at the in between the principles and the second reading, it's not going to come back anyway. There won't be time for it to come back in the second and third reading. So this government can't even get this through because it's a third reading, which is crucial, of course. It's irrelevant whether we pass the principles today, whether the second reading goes through, perhaps with amendments, and then it gets kicked out in the third reading. This Council of Ministers can't even guarantee that. So that's where I will stand up to defend scrutiny, is because they're saying we want to look at the principles. We've asked nicely, and there's a problem here, I think, is that scrutiny can automatically call in something after the principles. And this isn't the case with this scrutiny panel, but let's imagine you had a scrutiny panel which was politically motivated. And I think there was a strong argument that there was some of that in the gay marriage debate, same-sex marriage. It was pulled in politically, but you know that's still their prerogative. But they couldn't. That's a different issue. I think that had been around for a long time. These proposals, as they're currently drafted, of course, there's been a lot of talk around restructuring government. And it's one of those problems you're never really going to solve. It's a bit like states composition. It's going to need some kind of miracle to really get it right. And that's because, as I said before, there's a more fundamental issue with accountability and democracy, the ballot box and the choices. But I won't go into that again now. And it's absolutely right that scrutiny should say, look, we might want to look at the articles, and we can pull that in anyway, but let's get the principles right. And we need to think about the process about whether there should be a formal mechanism for scrutiny in the future to call in the principles. So a ministerial proposition is lodged. Within 2 weeks, scrutiny says, we want to scrutinise the principles. So you know it's clear, and they've got an absolute right to do that. And then there's a fixed period by which they must come back. 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks, whatever it is. And then you can't play games. It means games can't be played, and it means scrutiny, if they've had the opportunity to scrutinise the principles, they've done it. If they didn't want to, that's fine. And then they can still pull in the articles after that. That's not what we have at the moment. There's also a question, as I said before, you can't criticise a scrutiny panel for sometimes behaving politically, although they should be able to wear two hats, because in a unicameral system, we're the ones who do the scrutiny. So politicians, automatically the ones who aren't in government are the ones who have to do the scrutiny. That's, of course, a problem of not having a second chamber. I'm not advocating that we create a second chamber, but of course we know that elsewhere it's different people who do the scrutiny to the primary legislators, and that's perhaps something else for discussion at another time. But it's absolutely the right of scrutiny morally to be able to call this in to make sure we get it right. And ministers can't lodge late propositions in a term and then not expect to be scrutinised. You can stand up and praise scrutiny when they do what you want, if you're a minister, but when they do what you don't like, you've also got to take the rough with the smooth. So absolutely, we should support this reference back, or delay as it is.
Deputy Higgins?
Yes, sir. I'm sympathetic to the scrutiny panel view, but I also am sympathetic to the view of the Deputy of St John. I wonder whether it's possible that we can give a steer to, let's say, the government on the principles by turning this into an in-committee debate. So there is no vote at the end, so no one's going to be committed to accepting the particular principles, but the whole issue could be aired. I'm just putting that forward as a possible way of actually dealing with the bit of an impasse we're going to have.
Afraid I'll have to give that some consideration under standing orders, Deputy, and but it seems to me that in any event we must deal firstly with this particular proposition and not sidetrack ourselves with a sub-proposition. You could make the proposition afterwards, depending upon the result of this one. But it's yes. Very well. Deputy St Mary.
Thank you, sir. Perhaps I could put this proposition by the chairman of the relevant panel in some context. The panel are not opposing the principles debate, not pointing at what is contained in the proposition by the Council of Ministers at all. All they seek is a deferral to the next sitting to discuss it, simply so that in that debate, members can have the benefit of the panel's input into the principles. This is a fundamental point. Only this morning did we debate the social housing in Jersey. That is, to agree in principle to the introductory regulation, B, to agree in principle the proposed components of this regulatory framework. And I suggest that in the course of that debate, it was useful for members to have the benefit of the comments of the review panel. If this debate were to continue now, there's been no scrutiny by the panel, and that is a fundamental point. Why can we not delay so that the whole Assembly has a benefit of further input from the panel after appropriate scrutiny of the principles?
Deputy of Grouville.
Thank you, sir. It's almost with intrepidation that I stand up to sort of criticise what scrutiny are attempting to do here, because nobody wants to thwart scrutiny in their job and what they have got to do and should do. as part and parcel of government. However, I did welcome this in principle debate. I had certain amounts of concern when I read the proposition, and I went through it with a fine-tooth comb, and I had concerns from Jersey Overseas Aid point of view as a states-aided independent body. So I went along to the Chief Minister and I discussed them with him. There was an open door, there was a dialogue. The new executive officer was there, Chief Executive Officer, and I found that very, very refreshing, being able to go there, discuss things, and we will see when there is flesh on the bone how things pan out. But I feel to stop this in its tracks now will set us back. The Deputy of St Mary's just said all we need is a bit of delay. But a bit of delay, really? We have machinery of government, this vast machine. We have been crying out for it to be made fit for purpose, to be efficient, to be brought up to modern day standards. For those of us who've ever worked in the private sector, we know how things should be working, and then we come into the public sector and things are an awful lot different, actually. And the public are looking for an efficient machine. We have appointed somebody to take on this huge task. He has the manpower, he now needs the tools to do the job. So are we seriously going to tie his hands behind his back before he's even started? Give him the tools. This is an in-principle debate. Scrutiny will then have a look at it, put flesh on the bones with the Council of Ministers, and hopefully the whole thing will come forward. It's up to this Assembly to throw out what they don't want or bring forward to discuss it in a reasonable way. But to stop this happening now, and in principle, and then it will go to scrutiny, and then we'll have the elections, and then we'll start asking, why hasn't anything happened come autumn? So let's have the debate on let's have a good debate on the in principle. Let scrutiny work with the Chief Minister, do their work, and bring it back here. But let's please not delay it now. Let's get on with it. Let's tool ourselves up and look forward to a very efficient machinery of government. Thank you, sir.
Does any other member wish to speak on this proposition? The Conatable, St John.
Thank you, sir. There will be no delay. What we're asking to do is to scrutinise the principles as well as the articles. And we can then have a fully informed debate on the 20th of March. So, if I may, sir, make it quite clear, there will be no delay. This is probably the biggest piece of legislation that this government has ever brought forward. Certainly it's going to have the most far-reaching consequences. Whilst I welcome in many parts of what is being proposed, I do feel that scrutiny must play its part. When I was on corporate scrutiny, one question was repeatedly asked of the Chief Minister on almost every quarterly hearing, and that is, does he support the role of scrutiny? And yet, this has been lodged, and we have not yet had a hearing with the Chief Minister. Such a major piece of legislation, I would have hoped that the Chief Minister would have had a presentation to all States members so that at least all States members could be fully aware of what's happening. But none of this has happened. All we're asking for is that we are given all the facts and details before we have a debate. Many people may have ideas, which are misinformed or slightly off cue. And that does not lead to a constructive debate. We must have all the facts, warts and all, so that a constructive debate can take place. And I'm sorry that the Chief Minister on this occasion has not been cooperative with scrutiny, hasn't come to meet us, there hasn't been a public hearing. And so you haven't been to see us.
Through the chair, please.
And so, sir, I would urge members to provide us with the opportunity to do the job of scrutiny so that we can then inform this Assembly and the Assembly can take its decisions accordingly. I'm not trying to create any delay, as I have made it clear there will be no delay. This will still go ahead on the 20th of March, but we need to scrutinise the principles as well as the articles. Thank you, sir.
Deputy McClinton.
Thank you, sir. The people that we serve will be listening to this, and what they'll be hearing is that we are having a debate as to whether or not to have a debate, an in-principle debate, to discuss the very issues which are about them. Again, I say, the Parliament is eating itself. Again, it's going wrong, and the perception of what is happening here now will be appalled out there. Please, can we move on and discuss the matters at hand about the people we serve and stop serving ourselves?
Conor Thompson-Clement.
Sir, I made no comment on the merits or otherwise of Deputy Bree's proposition, but the speech of the Constable of St John's scared me to pieces, sir, when he suggested that this might be moved to the 20th of March. Could I ask him and other members to look at the agenda already out for March the 20th, and whatever happens as a result of this debate, then please do not put it on March the 20th, because we just have not got room for it, sir.
Deputy Andrew Lewis.
Thank you, sir. I was particularly moved by the Deputy Greville's words, because they were absolutely spot on, and I would urge members to remember that. We are very, very good in this Assembly at putting off this type of change, whether it be electoral reform, government reform, public sector reform. We're not very good at it. Ministerial government came into being, I think, in 2006, and it has not been reviewed properly for 12 years. Any organisation would review its processes and its establishment well before that. So we are well behind the curve. So any further delay is not a good idea. Deputy McClinton just said, anybody listening to this debate from the outside would think probably Groundhog Day. How many times have we had this sort of debate putting off things that need to be done, particularly when it comes to reform of this Assembly? I went through a tortuous debate, as we all did, only a few months ago, on electoral reform, and we made no progress. And that's something that consistently comes back to haunt me when I talk to the public. They will be listening to this and hearing what they think is the same thing over again. I don't want that for this Assembly. It brings the Assembly in disrepute. There is a process. We already, at the moment, go from first to second to third reading, sometimes in one sitting. Not many parliaments do that, and that is not a good idea. We have an opportunity, with the scrutiny system we have, to have this properly scrutinised at the appropriate time when there's something more fully produced to scrutinise. This is in principle. It's a very thin document. There's lots more that could be in there, which may come out of this debate today, which I'm sure scrutiny will input to at a later date, and they'll have opportunity then to scrutinise it. To delay and change the process we've established successfully, as Deputy Noel illustrated earlier, successfully established that process, and it's worked, and unfortunately the Minister got defeated on his proposal as a result of the scrutiny report possibly. That's the system. We should stick to it, get on with it, and hope that the public haven't heard too much of this debate today, because they will be dismayed. And I think we should get on with it. And I'm sorry, Deputy Bree, as well-intentioned your intentions may be, today, I'm sorry, we need to move on to the in-principle debate, and I would urge members to defeat his proposition. Thank you.
Conor Thompson-Peter.
Thank you, sir. Just reading the front page of the report, and
the thing that really strikes me in here is, if you don't mind, I'd like to read from part of the proposition. The final report of the Independent Jersey Care Inquiry represented to the States Assembly July 2017 points out a key failing. Failure to tackle a silo mentality among public sector agencies. States departments and institutions have been characterised by a territorialism and protectiveness rather than openness to pooling resources and learning. As a result, there's been a lack of comprehensive strategy to secure the best interests of children in the island. So what's happening here this afternoon seems to me to be exactly what this paragraph is saying we shouldn't be doing. Territorialism. And I have to say, and with all due respect to everyone concerned, I do feel there's an element of posturing here, because scrutiny could have made more approaches to work with the Chief Minister to get this through today, sir. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak on this proposition? Senator Ferguson.
Thank you, sir. I'm not sure that everybody understands what scrutiny is meant to do. If you read on the role of scrutiny, scrutiny ensures that the Assembly holds the executive branch of government to account for its decisions and actions. This helps improve government.
Microphone. You don't have your microphone on.
Sorry, thank you. I think you can probably hear me without, but those in the country can't. As I say, I'm not sure that possibly the new members who haven't been in scrutiny quite understand what scrutiny is about. Scrutiny is about holding the executive to account and also helping to improve government policies, legislation, and the administration of public service, ensuring they're fit for purpose. A review is an objective examination of executive policies. Well, this is exactly what we want to do with these policies. The policy changes in this project are significant. I mean, they appear to be putting more power in the hands of the Chief Minister, but that's to be debated when we go into the details of the policies. I do wonder if it's more Anglicisation, which, as everybody knows, I don't like. I have no problem in the part of the policy giving more power to the Chief Executive, because that was a problem very evident from earliest Chief Executives we've had, when I first entered the States. It really doesn't make sense to say, we don't need to look at the policies. This is a brilliant policy. Actually, one of the problems which nobody has addressed is the structure of the states, not the... You'll end up with a silo mentality because you're running it like the army.
The Senator's straying into the main debate. We're talking about the Deputy's proposal to call it in.
Well, that's correct, of course, Deputy. I mean, the Senator would not be alone in straying into the main debate, but it's a timely reminder that, of course, we are talking purely about whether there should be a reference to scrutiny at this point.
Well, these are all policy matters, sir, which do need
would the Speaker give way?
to.
I have a point of clarification from her.
Or ask for a point of clarification. Will you give way for that, Senator?
The Senator keeps referring to this being a policy, sir. I understood that this is actually a piece of legislation.
Yes.
I would just say that it's scrutiny's job to scrutinise policy, and it's whether it's appropriate, and therefore it is entirely appropriate for us to actually call in the whole project so that we may scrutinise the policy as well as the legislation. So I shall be supporting Deputy Breen.
Does any other member wish to speak on this proposition? Deputy Martin.
Yes, thank you, sir. And I have the advantage of sitting next to the proposer, and I'm literally trying to get my head around why it has to be called in. And it's not an in-principle debate. It's a debate on the principles of the law and the regulations as written. So I can understand what the, I think the deputy to my left is saying, sir, that if we agree the principles, that we are agreeing to every regulation and we're not. I mean, that's how I've understood. And if we agree to this, there's quite a bit in the P1. I think absolutely got to be done, and because we can't keep having, the same old excuses that we haven't given the right tools to the people. In fact, some of it now I've completely turned around, sir, and I could even go further. I mean, the minister can have his slate, I don't care, but that's the debate for the main debate. But really, I will listen to where the proposed are about scrutiny. I fully understand where scrutiny is. We have a set of draft law here, regulations that will change the way we operate. And if we agree, I mean, my in-principle agreement is we've got to change. And absolutely. So, and then on the next process, if we agree in principle to this law that things have got to change, you will then kindly ask the chairman of the scrutiny panel, would he like to look at it? And to me, that's where we should be. And I will hear what the scrutiny panel have to say. But I just thought I'd add my 2 pence, sir, because it's definitely not an in-principle debate. It is the debate on the principles of a law as written. But they can be changed if scrutiny feel after they've pulled them in. Thank you, sir.
Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? Chief Minister.
Thank you, sir. So I said, as I opened the in-principle debate, that I was slightly disappointed with the panel's and the chairman's comment in his report to these proposals, because I think, sir, from the line of questioning that I have had over the last 3.5 years, that they actually support the principles of removing silo working, of delivering a government which works efficiently and effectively in interest of islanders, and that the culture of the public service has to change. And I don't make those I don't make that comment lightly. I make it from, one might say, that the scars on the back or bitter experience, because quarter in and quarter out, they've asked me questions in that regard. And they themselves, sir, will remember that they brought an amendment to the medium-term financial plan asking for extra savings to be delivered because there was too much duplication across government. They were their words. And they are often first in a line of members standing up to criticise government and say it's not working in the interests of islanders. There is a process. I recognise that the chairman is using this standing order to request it to be referred to scrutiny now, but the standing orders equally allow for, after an in-principle debate on legislation, that they have the automatic right to pull it in and do a review. It's been suggested, sir, that following that standing order is disrespectful to scrutiny, is ignoring scrutiny, and that I've not appeared before the scrutiny panel. I haven't, sir. I have not appeared before this sub-scrutiny panel. And that disappoints me, sir, because I would have loved for us to have started this scrutiny review with public hearings, with me appearing before them and receiving my, well, it wouldn't be quarterly beating in this case, sir, but the verbal harassment that they rightly, sir, as the senator said, it is their job to hold ministers to account. And I am looking forward to that experience next Thursday, sir. But that was the first invitation I understand that I've had to do so. But that, I wouldn't want to mislead the Assembly, sir, in suggesting that they haven't started their work, because they have started their work. Only, I think, last Friday, sir, at least I think probably 4 of my officials, including the Chief Executive Officer, spent 2 hours with the scrutiny panel answering their questions, discussing their concerns. So, sir, yes, of course, this was lodged on at the beginning of January. It is the first P of 2008. It was lodged on the 8th of January. Well, I look back on those dates and I'm surprised with the weather and my stranding elsewhere that I was back on that date, but there we are. Obviously I was. But let's not forget that on the 20th of November last year, the Council of Ministers considered the policy principles of these machinery of government and strengthening governance arrangements. By the end of that week, sir, by the end of the week after the 20th, I'm assuming that was a Wednesday, so we're talking by the 22nd, I had written, sir, including the copies of those principles for this change, to PPC, to the Chairman's committee, and I'm not sure, but I think also PAC because of the finance law changes that were included. So I'm finding it a little bit difficult, sir, with the accusation that I've not cooperated with scrutiny or with scrutiny panels in this regard. I'm used to unfair accusations, sir, but sometimes they are just that little bit too unfair. And I think in this regard, bearing in mind that they had sight of these, the principles of these proposals as soon as the 22nd of November of last year, the Deputy, sir, is shaking his head. He knows that I wrote to the Chairman's Committee on, at the latest, the 22nd of November. Not his sub-panel, because his sub-panel obviously had not been set up there, sir, but he is a member of the Chairman's Committee in his role as Chair of the Economic Affairs Scrutiny Panel. So, sir, rather than thinking I've been disrespectful to scrutiny and that by not wanting this reference back to scrutiny at this point is being disrespectful, I don't believe it is. I believe, as I said right at the start, that we should today have this debate on the principles. I am absolutely expecting that scrutiny will bring some amendments, perhaps along the lines that I mentioned earlier, that some of the articles members might reject. Perhaps, as I said, the ability for the Chief Minister to do a reshuffle. I fully expect that, sir. And that is absolutely the democratic right of this Assembly and of the scrutiny panel. But, sir, I say to members again, let us have this principles debate, then let scrutiny I've forgotten the words. I had not finished, no. Exercise their right, understanding orders, to pull in this piece of legislation. Sir, I am a mild-mannered man. Sometimes people suggest that that is a weakness. It takes a considerable effort to rile me. But when I see an institution and an organisation, as I said in my opening remarks, that is letting islanders down because of the way it's structured, despite having fantastic people working in it who want to do their best for islanders, when I see an institution like that letting islanders down, I cannot stand by and mildly say, let us take some more time. Let us not make a decision today. let us put it off, because it'll all come out in the wash. That cannot be right. It cannot be right. And I urge members to allow the proper process of scrutiny exercising their rights after we have debated the principles. Let us get rid of silo mentality where nobody's really responsible. There's an ineffective accountability framework and islanders are being let down. So I don't want to have to be emotional and melodramatic and point back to the Care Inquiry report and some of the really difficult things it said about the structure and some of the desperate effects that that structure is having on children right now, sir. Right now. And you, sir, in your other role, in a place not far from here, have to make difficult decisions about some of those young people. Because our institution and our structure and our system of governance is letting them down. Let's not put off this change any longer than we need to, sir. Thank you.
Well, it's a matter for members, of course. 17 members have spoken so far. Does any other member wish to speak on this proposition? Deputy Simpson.
Sir, I won't talk for long. Chief Minister knows that I'm not 100% content with his proposals, but he also knows, sir, that I am a great fan of scrutiny. I look back fondly on my 3 years of scrutiny on the Chairman's Committee with the Deputy of St John's, my time chairing Economic Affairs and vice chairing the Environment Department. And I despair sometimes, but it seems to me, sir, that scrutiny haven't followed the direction that we set when we were there, and that they see to themselves more often now as an opposition rather than a scrutiny panel. Surely we all in this House want to do better, and my time on scrutiny was trying to work with the executive to come up with policies and principles and regulations and articles which were better. Work with the executive and make it better. So I plead for members to say to Deputy Bree, work with the Chief Minister. Chief Minister, work with Deputy Bree on this. Let's not hold up. Surely we all want to do better. We want to move forward as fast as we possibly can. And I just ask both sides to work together to move ahead today, so on the 20th we can come back and make some changes for the better.
Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? Call on Deputy Bree to respond.
Thank you very much indeed, sir, and thank you very much to all members who have spoken during this debate. I would like to stress again, sir, that my intention was not to discuss the principles of the law. My intention was merely to discuss the process of scrutiny. And it is quite interesting how it has become apparent that certain members have very, very different views on what the role of scrutiny actually is. I feel that to be a shame coming from certain people, but I'm not going to particularly pick up on any particular member's speech, because I think that's wrong. Everybody is entitled to their own views. The only comment I would like to make is one particular speaker cast aspersions on my capacity as chairman of this panel to actually do the job, and quoted two things: an external relations policy review and a licensing law delay. All I would like to say is that I feel that that particular speaker should get his facts right before criticising anybody. If he looks, the external relations policy review comes under the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel, and we have actually suspended that and notified the department of such. And the reasons that the licensing law report is delayed is because the department who are lodging it have changed their mind 4 times in the last 3 weeks as to exactly whether or not they want a licensing assembly or a licensing authority. So it is not the panel's fault. But really what I'd like to get back to is the fact that what we were asking originally as a review panel was that we wanted to delay the debate, or we were asking the Chief Minister to delay the debate until the 20th of March, in order for us to give us time as a review panel to actually produce a meaningful report that could actually explain some of the areas where we may have concern. It was not seeking to have an excuse to delay the debate. It was not seeking to, once again, as we have been accused of, talking about ourselves. This is actually a very, very important piece of draft legislation. It is not talking about ourselves. It is talking about draft legislations, the principles of which we will be asked to vote on, that are going to amend significantly the way in which our civil service works, accountability works within the civil service, and ministerial government works. And that vote will have implications on the next assembly. So all scrutiny were asking was to delay the debate until the 20th of March. Irrespective, I understand the connotables and Clement's concerns, but I'm afraid, sir, irrespective of what other work is on, surely it's more important to get a debate right than to worry about how much we have on the order paper that day. Now, the Chief Minister, as his wont, likes to, how can I put it, criticise if continually other people criticise him. And he said in his speech, with their history. Well, I'm afraid, Chief Minister, the review panel was only formed 3 weeks ago. We don't have a history. We have tried to arrange meetings with the Chief Minister, and the earliest possible date we were given for a public hearing by the Chief Minister was the 1st of March. It has been suggested that we should have worked harder by one speaker. And we should have tried harder. We should have spoken more. We tried, sir. That is the point that I have brought this proposition. We have tried. But in the time frame allotted to this review panel, we have been unable, despite our best efforts, to actually carry out our role of scrutiny. And I am very concerned that the Chief Minister has inferred that this particular review panel has not been cooperative. Cooperation works two ways, sir. And I think that's something that possibly the Chief Minister needs to remember. However, I understand that obviously many members feel that this debate should proceed. That is entirely their right. But I would like just to stress one thing. Despite what both Deputy McClinton and Deputy Andrew Lewis feel, this is not an in-principle debate. We are debating the principles of the draft legislation. There is a big difference. Because what you will be asked to vote on is, do you, in principle, agree with these articles? Then it will be given to scrutiny to review, which is part of standing orders, and we will go away and we will come back with a report. But at that point in time, a decision will have been made that in principle we agree with the direction that these articles take us in. Personally, and I did not wish to speak about the principles themselves, but personally, I fully support the change in the accountability within the civil service. Personally, I have issues with the other bits in it. But that's not the point. My personal view, it does not and will not, I can promise that to the Assembly, play any role in the review that the review panel carry out. And all I was asking, sir, was that the Assembly allowed the scrutiny process to proceed until the 20th of March. I feel it a great shame that many members here do not see that as being an appropriate function of scrutiny. I would, however, urge most members to consider if a delay until the 20th of March for scrutiny to carry out its work is really asking that much. Well, I commend the proposition to the Assembly and would call for the appel, sir.
Has been called for.
So before we do that, could I just ask the chairman if he would consider withdrawing a comment he made in his previous comments in regards to the Economic Development, Tourism, Sport and Culture changing its mind 4 times over the licensing law in recent times. He knows that not to be correct, sir, and I just ask that he withdraw that comment.
Well, it seems to me that is what the Deputy has said. It clearly is a view that he holds. Whether it's a correct view or an incorrect view is not for the Assembly at this point. Conatab, I think you've made the point. Your voice is on the record.
It's misleading because it's untrue.
Well, it may be that what you're suggesting is the Deputy has unintentionally misled the Assembly, but as I say, you've made that observation. Unless the Deputy wishes to stand and make a correction, which he's entitled to do, but if he doesn't, then the matter has to rest there at this point. The appel has been called for. Members have had the opportunity of returning to their seats. I ask the referee to open the voting. The vote is on whether the debate should be suspended for the purposes of scrutiny. If members have had the opportunity of casting their votes, I ask the referee to close the voting. The proposition has been defeated. 15 votes pour, 28 votes contre, no abstentions.
Those voting for, Senator Ferguson, the Conatabs of St Clement, St Saviour and St John, Deputies Southern, Hilton, Kevin Lewis, Tadier, Higgins, Mezek, St Juan, Labby, Bree, MacDonald and St Mary.
We now resume the vote on the debate on the principles of the draft law. Does any member wish to speak? No member wishes to speak. Deputy of St Peter.
Thank you, sir. It may take me just a little while to fire up my device again, but today it's a very good day, actually, in my view, to debate the principles of this proposition, because it follows the excellent speech that was really well received today, given by our new Chief Executive to the Chamber of Commerce, and I really implore all members to read the speech of the Chief Executive that's on gov.je. It was posted there today. And what I wanted to share with members, the reason I'm looking at my device, is a tweet following that debate and a reaction by Caring Cooks, which I think is an organisation, a charity that all members are familiar with. And it reads, hashtag Chamber Lunch, 300 children haven't eaten breakfast before school and we must focus on life chances from an early age. Great to hear from our new CEO at States of Jersey. So I think that's a good example of the response to the speech this lunchtime and what lies behind the anticipated direction that this proposition will take the States of Jersey in. And I think we've all touched upon the desire to see change and particularly resonated, of course, with the Constable of St Peter and his reminder of the purpose, and this is part of our response to the care inquiry and how necessary that is. It is a great credit to the Chief Minister, sir, that he's brought this proposition, and it is absolutely timely, because I think it is right, as experienced members who have been in this Assembly for a term, for us to debate the future of the next Assembly at this time. We all agree, I think, that change is necessary and a new direction is necessary, and the Chief Minister has put in place, with the new Chief Executive and the work of the transition team who've been here contributing to the bones of this proposition, a blueprint for us to move forward and to better serve the public. And I think it's only right and timely that we do this as an exiting Assembly rather than asking a new Assembly to consider it, because the new Assembly, the argument will be, I'm quite sure, that there aren't simply enough members who have the experience to deliberate and to contribute to a debate that would happen at that time. So, sir, I commend this proposition to members, and I hope that they will show their support for it.
Does any other member wish to speak on the principles? Deputy Wickinton.
Thank you, sir. About time. These changes are long overdue. As I said in my previous speech, I'm relatively new to the Assembly, but everything I've seen, every report and all my experiences says that we need to do things better. We need to be more service orientated rather than department orientated. I think there was one of the things about the committee system of old was that it was very silo based, and if you wanted to do anything that crossed committees, it was very, very lethargic, it was very slow, and you find that kind of things in here. Why not have a Minister for Children? But that's not just one department. Just for instance, in that way, it's a service-based department in some ways, but it has to cross health, social security, education, housing. It would cross the borders, but when you get into the silos of the departments right now, it creates friction or duplication, or there's different priorities that are set that don't mean that that means that the actual subject matter doesn't get the priorities that we need. This is exactly what we need to change. We need to be able to create things that are more dynamic and they move in the ways that the islanders expect our services to. Of course, you can't do that in the current system without making sure we make changes within this Assembly and within the government. So you can't create a new service-based department if we don't have a minister that's accountable to it, or it's accountable to a minister, should I say. So I support the idea that we can be more dynamic, we can change it, and we can do things in a better way that is more in line with the services that we provide the islanders in the right way. I do, we've got the comments from PPC, I am concerned about the ability to do it by order. Personally myself, the idea of doing it under subordinate legislation and then waiting if somebody's got a problem to bring a proposition to the Assembly to overturn a ministerial decision is not the right mechanism for this. I think it's the right idea, but I do believe that this Assembly or the Assembly of the future should have the choice to debate it and decide it because we are the representatives of the island. So if there was anything I wanted to give to scrutiny to look at, it's certainly from the comments from PPC, but that's the one area that I really am concerned about. I know it will slow things down, and I know we've waited long enough, as I said in my first place, but we are here to make those decisions as elected representatives of the island together, and I do believe that this should be a decision for the Assembly, not a subordinate legislation. Thank you, sir.
Senator Farnham.
Thank you, sir. We have a tendency to blame the system when quite often it is the people that are at fault. And we've done it before, we're going to do it again in the future. We also have a tendency of getting the order of priorities wrong when it comes to reforming machinery of government, reforming electoral process, reforming the shape and structure of this Assembly. And it's happened before. We've reformed the shape and structure of the Assembly, which has, perhaps forced the machinery of government or the electoral system in a way that's other than ideal because we've got the priority and the order wrong. And technically, and preferably, in my opinion, we should be focusing on the structure of the Assembly and the electoral system before we move to the next stage of the machinery of government. But of course, I'm not going to open that debate just now. I know why I'm here in this Assembly. I think most of members do, and we're here to serve. And I'm very clear about that. We're also an Assembly of independent politicians. And we have a party, sir, of also with politicians of conviction. And I'm sure none of us want to be part of a sort of high-level policy-making group. And that's one of the fears I have with what is proposed. We are here because we all individually and collectively want to make a difference. I don't just want to set policy. We want to make a difference. We want to make decisions in our scrutiny panels or our parties or our ministries or whatever other committees we work on. So I'm not sure how these propositions and these regulations will impact on the work this Assembly's been doing and the individual politicians have been doing for decades. And that's something we have to look at and consider very carefully. However, I am going to support the principle, sir, with the understanding that I don't agree with all the regulations as they're set out, as currently set out, and I'm considering with other members some amendments. And I would urge other members really to look closely at them and work with scrutiny, listen to what I'm sure scrutiny will do a good job with this. But there are some very, very interesting ramifications that we mustn't be too hasty about. That's it, sir. I would. There's lots to say, but I just want to finish by saying this. I think we're all in agreement. We absolutely have to put this island back on the road to greater political efficiency and accountability. And the direction of travel we're heading in with these principles is right. I think they are a force for good, but I appeal to members to look very, very carefully at the detail and come back with amendments if they need to. And if we all do that, and we all do the homework on this and give it the intention it deserves and it needs, I think we could end up with something quite good. Thank you.
Deputy of St John.
Thank you, sir. I'm standing after listening to some members as if this is something new. It's not. It's a long, long battle of the States Assembly ever since bringing in ministerial government of how and in what way we want to have a proper accountability framework, have a proper governance function, and how that interacts together. And I think the last debate on this Deputy Bree's proposition for the scrutiny to call it in is a perfect example of why I think actually this doesn't go far enough. I have an issue if we're going to be shuffling ministers that we're not changing standing orders to allow the flexibility in scrutiny. The PPC comment, I think this is vitally important. You don't have the ability to have the flexibility within scrutiny to be able to pick up a review on a specific strategic item or a topic, and you've got the constraints of having a certain panel that has to scrutinise certain ministers, although there is an ability to set up review panels. But I think there is a certain amount of bureaucracy within the scrutiny system that doesn't need to be there because they're not actually making the day-to-day power changes that ministers are. And they're doing a review and they're carrying out the appropriate criticism or constructive changes that need to be made. And they can bring amendments forward to ministers' policy or legislation. And I think that's really important to recognise because in a similar model, which we have only across the water in the UK, their select committees cannot do that. We have the ability on scrutiny to be actually make those constructive changes. So I think already, in terms of actually shuffling the ministers, is a fundamental flaw with not changing scrutiny alongside it. And it's actually dangerous to do so. Because although the last speaker, Senator Farnham, mentioned how he'd like a more politically efficient system, I've got really bad news for any future minister. If we want our system to work properly with accountability, openness and transparency, There has to be better functioning between the government and scrutiny. There has to be a better open and transparent way of criticising each other without making it personal. And there has to be a way to work to provide functions and services for the public in the public good. I know the last term as chair of the Public Accounts Committee, it was vitally obvious the problems we had when we lost our chief executive at that time. There was a report done about compromise agreements. There's been last term and the term before that, machinery of government reviews. I unfortunately took part on both of them and promised that I wouldn't take part in machinery government this term. There was 2 years spent last term of members of that subcommittee of the PPC interviewing states members, senior civil servants, submissions from the public, asking them their views on machinery government, ministerial government, scrutiny, how it does or doesn't work. There's reports that anyone can access online that we can see where there are issues and how we could possibly address them. The one issue that comes up in here, which I will be supporting, and as it's an in-principle debate, I'd like to give my reasons why I think it's so important, because the Chief Minister's chosen only to give a few examples of why changing the role of the Principal Accounting Officer is accountable officer is important. But there are so many incidences that have happened over the years before my time, right at the primary edge of ministerial government, and the ministerial government's in its infancy. But I think the problem we've got is there are a lot of members that don't want to continue with ministerial government, but believe for some reason it's actually politically efficient. Now, I get worried when people say politically efficient, because that assumes that this assembly will hand over lots of powers and legislation for ministers to make lots and lots of orders and do things under the whim, so that there isn't that openness and that accountability there. And actually, the scrutiny function goes hand in hand with ministerial government. If you don't want scrutiny, you will not have ministerial government, and that's the way it should and absolutely must work. The Principal Accounting Officer role, I believe, is an opportunity for us to see how things could possibly work better. And the reason why I say that is because, I mean, it's great that the new chief executive is here, and I wish him good luck in all his endeavours. But a lot of people have turned around to me and said, "Oh, what do you think? This is promising. This is, this is exciting. We've got a new chief executive." I've probably been here too long, Senator Routier as well. But I've heard it time and time again. Everyone pins their hopes on this one person that comes in the top and hopes and pleads that we're going to change things dramatically and it's all going to be wonderful and it's all going to be efficient. Without changing this role, a lot of those things, I don't believe, can actually happen and will not, because I've seen it firsthand before. I'd like to see the opportunity given to the new Chief Executive Officer to be the Principal Accountable Officer, and I'd like to see how it works, whether it works, and ensuring that there's a proper accountability model around it. And I just plead to members, should scrutiny call this in, which I hope they do after the principal debate, there are 2 reports that were done last term on the machinery of government. A lot of work was carried out by various members on machinery of government, and there are issues within there that I believe are probably still needed to be addressed. It's R105, 2013 was the final report, and R39 2013, which was the interim report from the subcommittee. And it lays out a lot of the issues that previous assemblies have actually come across and had to deal with. And I think it's absolutely relevant to the legislation that's being put before us today. And like I say, I can't agree to any form of shuffling ministers without changes to the role of scrutiny and how that functions and works, and effectively works alongside an accountability structure for ministerial government. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Martin.
Thank you, sir. And I did want to make a few comments on about scrutiny. The Deputy Sir Johns, I think, has covered what I wanted to say, and quite clearly it's in the PPC comments. But I take a different view to the Deputy of St John's, that why I can work with looking at this, these new laws and regulations with scrutiny, and absolutely, if we allow the minister to move his ministers around, it should be done by order and it should be done quickly. We can't have a situation we had last time, and what happened over those 15, 16 months where ED didn't have this, something was moving. Oh, let's know what happened. It was the Jersey Innovation Fund, and you couldn't pin anybody down, actually. Some members said to me, sir, in the coffee room, oh, this is a bit much. You've given a lot of responsibility to this, the principal, the accounting officer, one hand, and maybe a minister. And I said, yes, but there you know who to go to when it goes wrong. Let's hope it doesn't. I'm looking, I have faith. I want it to work, but we cannot carry on with the system we have where there's too many corners and too many officers hiding behind. It wasn't my fault, Gov. I wasn't there. It's not under the law. It doesn't. I'm not accountable. It is about being accountable. So that covers that, sir. I do fully agree with, we've made the comment, hopefully working with the scrutiny panel, there should be something. The Deputy of St John's, when she was a deputy in St Saviour, done, as she say, loads of work on this. We don't need to, if we haven't got rigid ministries, we don't need to have rigid scrutiny. But if we can have standing panels, we can call issues in, as the Deputy of St John's always puts it, issue-based scrutiny. But I want to see that before we go. It won't stop this, and it should be being done simultaneously. I just want to comment again on the collective responsibility, because people say, well, sir, why did they make a big deal about having collective responsibility and now they're doing away with collective? It's not, and it's quite clear, it's not necessarily that. It will be for the next Council of Ministers to decide whether this council wants to work under collective responsibility, and it will be done through a ministerial code. That's fine, because it might work for the next. We don't want to keep changing the law. It's a bit like the okey cokey. Are you going to be in or out? Are you collective or you're not? But I'm making this point, sir, because the people here, we still, as we say in PPC's comments, might not have to put it on each proposition, but we need to know where the council, who the next council is, are, and who is in that collective when they decide. And that's fine. We've put it in a code. It will, they will, whoever they are, will make their mind up. And I think just on the principal accounting offer and the comments from the Chairman's Committee, there's a part on page 3, paragraph 6, which the panel's understanding is that, and it was explained, I heard it on the radio, they have concerns that even if a small amount of money is given to a company, a grant or funded body from the States, that the principal accounting officer will have, can look at how this money is spent. And I say absolutely right. It's not our money. I don't care if it's £1, £100 or thousands of pounds. If you don't look after your pennies and your pounds, you're going to lose the thousands. So I have a different issue. Well, it's not an issue. I think there isn't an issue. It's not our money. If we are not confident in the bodies, the amounts we're giving it, and we should be looking, we should have the law, and this does it. So I think I'll leave it there, sir. I think I've covered everything I want to say. But again, in principle, if, you know, you can see sort of basically where this is going, and I said it in the other debate, the last debate, I've now really come around after all these years of fighting ministerial government that you should have a slate, sir. Have your slate. Again, it goes back to the who's responsible. There's your slate. This is my slate of ministers. This is my slate. I want to enjoy assistant ministers to work with them. And we can vote in or out. And if they go after 6 months, something really bad's gone wrong, they can't use the excuse, well, you foisted that minister or assistant minister on me. So it's going to come there. I can see where it's going. And I will support it this time. It's taken, well, I might not be here, sir. I may not be here. But I can see where it's going. And actually, it's one of those things in political life. You do learn some things. And you actually, after you keep looking at it and you keep seeing why it's not working, because we didn't adopt the proper. We didn't adopt it all. And we're slightly going a bit nearer there now. And it will, as Deputy St John's, it will either work all the way down, but we can't keep doing it like this. It's got to be seamless across. Know who you can hold in account for the civil service and the accounting money, and know who chose their team, and let them do it. They stand and fall on their own. So I'll leave it there, sir. I've talked about the principles. A lot more work to do on the regs and what's in the law. And I'm willing to work as much as anybody else with scrutiny and work to get something in there about scrutiny, at least. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Andrew Lewis.
So I thought I was in a queue, sir, but I shall endeavour to fire away straight away. I welcome this, sir, particularly when I turned to page 5 and realised that there's a list there of a number of reports that I was very intrinsically involved with as chairman of PAC. And time again, these issues came up with the Controller and Auditor General and my committee. And it was about accountability, it was about accounting officers working in silos, and about not sharing information with other accounting officers, because legally they didn't have to. Sorry, sir, but that is not good governance. It's not good management. It's not a good structure. And that's been highlighted in so many reports that I'm sure you've all read. Just nod. Okay, some of them were quite long reports, some could even say they were a bit dry. But they made the same points over and over again. At the same time, several reports came out when the Deputy of St John's was in the chair of PAC, saying the same things. So this isn't new. We've known about this for a long time. And Senator Ferguson is saying the same thing, I believe, when she was also chairman of the PAC. It is an accounting issue that needs to be resolved. It's a danger to our very structure and fabric of our financial management not to fix it. The reporting structures are not as they should be. So from that point of view, I'm absolutely and totally supportive of the principles that are trying to be achieved here. When it comes to selecting the Council of Ministers, though, we do that on the floor of this chamber when we're returned, those that there are, in the next assembly. The Council Minister, or rather the Chief Minister, puts forward his team. And we vote on that team if there is another candidate to be considered, or we accept the Chief Minister's proposal for his team. Under this principle, the following week that we sit, the Chief Minister could come back and change a minister at the drop of a hat. I'm not saying he shouldn't have the ability to change his team. Any cabinet, anywhere in the world, any government system should have the ability to do that, but I think there needs to be some kind of check and balance in there, so it can't happen the following week. I'm not suggesting it would, and if it did, I'm sure there would be hopefully a very good reason for doing so. At the moment, effectively, what this Assembly has agreed to and in some cases has elected, because there may well be a contested seat, although with the ballot as it is now open, it's less likely to happen. Deputy Lammy will know all about that. But it is as it is. That could happen. So you could actually have a change the following sitting if the Chief Minister chose to do that. And I think there needs to be a check and balance in there to that effect, so that something we've agreed the previous sitting is not suddenly changed the following sitting, unless there's a very, very good reason. So I have an issue with that. But the principles regarding structure, management, and good governance around the financial management of this huge organisation called the States of Jersey, with its £860 million budget, is essential. Absolutely essential. And we need to get on with it. We need to do it. So I'm fully supportive of that, which is a very, very important part of this proposition, or this, in principle, proposition. The other thing that bugs me, has done for many years as an observer of politics and then being intrinsically involved, is the silo mentality of some departments. That is because of the ministerial law. Each department has its own law. That's just the way it is at the moment. That prevents a lot of interdepartmental working, even if those ministers and officers and accounting officers want to work in a certain collaborative way. It's actually quite difficult for them. So that's an unintended consequence of the current system that we have. And we need to try and break that down, and this goes some way to doing that. And I welcome that, because at the end of the day, we might think the State of Jersey is very big, and it is, but we're still a very small place. And we have, in my view, too many ministries. We have 11. I would like to see 6. I think that's possible. And that's the sort of radical moves that I want to see in the future. Now, the Chief Minister is already doing some of that by creating a Chief Minister's Department, that some people don't like, because there is more and more going on in that department. But that, I believe, I hope, is the beginning of reducing the other ministries to nothing, perhaps. 11 ministries for a tiny island is too many. But that's a debate for another day. But at the moment, it's difficult to achieve that with the system that we have unless you break down the silos. And this goes some way to achieving that. So I welcome it, and I also welcome much more information coming forward in the next debate that we have, when there's more, it's more complete, and scrutiny have had the opportunity to look at it. I'm not going to go over the old ground that we had a few moments ago about whether scrutiny should do this now or later. The time is later. We'll have a more full document to consider then, and I hope some of what I said today and others have said will be included in the comments that scrutiny, no doubt, will make in the future. So I welcome this. It's quite a lot, a little bit too late, but better late than never. We need to move on. It's now nearly 13 years, I think, since ministerial government started. It's time to change it, move it on. It's an evolving process. Government, assemblies, organisations generally change, evolve. Government and public sector moves a bit slower. That's because we consult widely, and rightly so, but that slows things down. But 13 years without much change, I think, is too long. This is that opportunity for that change. I would grab it now, and move things on so that we can make the change and just function better as an assembly, as a government, and as a public sector. This is what we need to do that, and I think it's been well thought through, but there's more detail to come, and I'm sure we'll get it in the fullness of time. If we don't, I think the gentleman behind me will get very upset. So I'm sure you won't want to do that to him and other members of scrutiny. So I'm sure in the fullness of time there'll be more here to look at, and the detail that I've raised will be more fleshed out and others have raised as well. So I welcome it, and I would urge members to vote for it. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak? Senator Routier.
Thank you, sir. I mean, just picking up on a point which the previous speaker mentioned about the way government evolves over a period of time. I was had the joy of being part of the committee system many years ago, and then we've moved to ministerial system, and it's now time to move on again. We've gradually got to find new ways of working. In recent times, I've been speaking to people who have been considering the options about perhaps standing for, well, I've been trying to persuade some people to stand for election, and they're very worried about the system that we have. They're sort of a bit disenchanted by what they hear about the way that we currently work. And they thought, why on earth would I want to join an organisation like that? Because they so can't get anything done, and it takes so long to do things. I think this is a really exciting opportunity for our government and for our island to actually be able to achieve things and get things done. And I think this would be a signal if we can actually show that we are prepared to change the way we are working, that we could encourage new, enthusiastic people to stand for our government, for our assembly. I think we would be inclined to, we will be able to do things in a far better way. In fact, I'm so excited about these changes, I perhaps wish I wasn't retiring. But it is, honestly, it is, I think it's a real opportunity for our government to evolve to the next stage and to do things and to serve our community far better than we have been. And I hope members will be able to support the principles.
I have one member on the list to speak, and it is very close to 5:30. I'm wondering how many more members wish to speak in the debate, whether there's a feeling. Another two. Do members wish to? Deputy Bree is the next speaker. Do you want to come in, Deputy Bree, and then the Assembly might consider adjourning, or do you wish to?
I propose we keep going, sir.
Deputy Bree.
Thank you very much, sir. I'm sure you will be pleased to hear, as will members, my speech will not be that long. I stand before you in a difficult position because I wear two hats. First of all, I'm chairman of the Machinery of Government Review Panel, and secondly, I'm obviously an independent deputy. If I may speak firstly as the chairman of the review panel, I am very pleased to hear that members are willing to work with the panel, and I would urge any members to come forward with concerns, issues or suggestions they may have how this may be improved. Obviously, the review panel will be calling this in. We will be looking at the articles in detail and looking at the implications of all of them. And I certainly hope that we have more meetings with the new Chief Executive and his team so we can flesh out some of these concerns or negate them completely. And I think it's going to be important that we are given adequate time to do that. Putting my other hat on as the independent deputy, one of the deputies of St Clement's, which I assure you, anything I say now will not influence my role as the chairman of a review panel. I just want to make that clear. Essentially, looking at this, we have three parts, or major parts, to this particular draft legislation. And very quickly, I'd like to speak to each of them. Firstly, the introduction of the role of the principal accountable officer, and underneath him, accountable officers. For the first time, I think all of us can actually see, dare one say it, light at the end of the tunnel. Because what we are going to be able to do as members of the state, so we're here as the elected representatives of the public, to be able to go to somebody within the civil service or public service, whatever you want to call it, and go, right, you're accountable for this, aren't you? And they will say, yes, right, can you help? Or can we look at this? We are, for those of us who have worked for major global corporates like I have, the silo mentality nearly destroyed them back in the 1990s. And it became really difficult for decisions to be made, for flexibility to creep in, to react to market forces. And this is why the major corporates did away with the silo mentality. You didn't have corporate banking, investment banking, private banking, fund management. There was a much flatter structure. This is what we need to move towards. And it may require the dismantling of the departmental system that we know today. And that, sir, I believe to be a good thing. That we actually have the ability to go, who is best to deliver this project or this policy that the States Assembly want, the public want? How are we going to do it? Right, you're accountable. Work with all these people. Forget about the fact that you used to be housing, you used to be infrastructure. No, you are the States of Jersey. That's what we've got to aim for. Because only then, will we actually be able to deliver the services the public deserve, and two, actually clarify and work out and learn from our mistakes. So I would say, sir, that part of it, I am very keen to see that moved forward in one form or another. It will take time. This dismantling of the silo mentality, the departmental mentality, it's ingrained in people. You cannot expect it to happen overnight. And also there will be a huge resistance to change. That is something that can be managed. You can turn that into a positive. But at first there will be massive resistance to change. The middle bit that I've still not quite got my head round is this issue of budget transfers between departments, and we'll put that in inverted commas, because according to the legislation that we're looking at, the Minister, that being the Minister for Treasury and Resources, shall, after consultation with the Chief Minister and the Principal Accounting Officer, give the States Assembly at least 2 weeks' notice before an amount is transferred under paragraph 1. So what we're looking at is, right, if we need to get resources from one department to another, one ministry to another, who makes the decision? Well, if I'm moving money from infrastructure to, say, the health department, surely those two ministers should be talked to. This is saying, no, it's a decision of the Chief Minister, Minister for Treasury and Resources, and the Principal Accounting Officer. Now, that might be because the two ministers involved are not going to let it happen easily, i.e. the one who's losing his budget. So again, it might be that that's building in greater flexibility, greater reactivity to situations. But that, I think, needs further discussion, further examination, and further consultation with all States members. We then move on to the restructuring of ministerial government. There will be, under this, a new legal entity called the Jersey Ministers, which every minister and assistant minister will be part of. And any legally executable document referring to any piece of land, lease, property, because it's legally owned by the Jersey Ministers, all legal ownership will go into the Jersey Ministers. Any assistant minister or minister can execute any document on behalf of the Jersey Ministers. Therefore, it means that whilst on the one hand we may say we need to be able to react fast to things, we need to be able to be reactive rather than, we need to be proactive rather than reactive. I'm concerned that an assistant minister in economic development, tourism, sport and culture can sign a legally binding document on behalf of the Minister for Treasury and Resources or the Minister for Infrastructure entering into a lease. That's what this says. Now, again, I think we need to look at this very closely. Surely there have to be checks and balances. Also, are we actually creating a quasi-political party? By creating, everything is owned by the Jersey Ministers, everything. So you are either in or you're out. Now, perhaps nothing changes, as I heard to my right. We are creating this new legal entity. And again, we need to look at this a bit more closely. Is it the right thing to be doing? Where are the checks and balances on the power that is being vested in that legal entity? And the other one that I have grave concerns about is the powers that are going to be vested in the Chief Minister under this draft legislation. Now, we as an Assembly elect a person to be a particular minister. So, for example, at the moment we elect somebody to be the Minister for Treasury and Resources because we believe that person is best suited for that role. We then elect somebody to be the Minister for Environment because we believe that person, as an Assembly, we believe that person has the experience, the expertise to be best suited for that role. That is our decision as an Assembly because we do not have political parties. Right? That's the important point. We, the Assembly, elect a minister. But under this, the day after we have elected the two ministers, the Chief Minister can swap them either as individuals, their roles, or can move the current functions that the Minister for Treasury and Resources carries out over to the Minister for Environment. He can create and extinguish ministries at will. He can move budgets from one ministry to another at will. And perhaps now I'm starting to understand why collective responsibility is no longer required. Because are we, with this, placing too much power into the hands of one individual, one office, if you want to call it that, who has the ability to control completely every single minister and assistant minister, and therefore perhaps no longer needs the idea of collective responsibility? That, again, we need to look at. Where are the checks and balances? Where is the ability to scrutinise? Policy, not only legislation. Let scrutiny not fall back into just doing legislative scrutiny. We need to be able to scrutinise, discuss, and possibly mould policy going forward. That's the real role of scrutiny, not as has been suggested as an opposition. That is not what scrutiny is. But if scrutiny firmly believes that a policy being put forward by a minister or council of ministers is actually not the right thing for the people of Jersey and has the evidence to back that up, then why can we not say that? We are not being the opposition. We are trying to be the voice of reason, the voice of evidence, and the critical friend. So don't knock scrutiny because it doesn't agree with you. There may be a very, very good reason. And so, sir, I just remind members that there's an awful lot in this legislation that affects an awful lot of areas. And I think all members need to think very carefully about looking at the legislation, looking at the implications. Come and talk to the review panel. Please do. Ministers, we would like you to come and talk to us. In private, in public, it doesn't matter. We need to talk. And that's all we're saying. This has to be carefully looked at to ensure, is it the right thing, and are the necessary checks and balances in place? Thank you, sir.
Deputy St Martin.
Thank you, sir, and I'm happy to follow Deputy Bree because, like him, I have some reservations about the concept of Jersey ministers, and I have some reservations about enormous amounts of power being vested in one Chief Minister. And the Chief Minister knows that I'm not 100% happy about those subjects. But let me say that I'm delighted that collective responsibility is coming off the table because I've never felt it worked very well. I'm delighted that we're going to break down more silos. I'd like to think, Deputy Noel is not here at the moment, but certainly I'd like to feel we've broken down some silos, certainly in the first 18 months of my ministry, maybe not so much more recently. But I think we've done better in this last session of government than previously. And I'm also not worried about change. I embrace change, and I'd like to get on and change. But of course, it has to be change that I agree with. Because I'm an independent member, I'm elected independently with my own policies, and when I sought to become Environment Minister, I had my own very clear ideas about what I wanted to do. And I want to be able to see in the future that I can still implement those policies without being deflected by others. And while I do always look for the positives, I, in this sort of circumstances, consider the worst case scenario. And I'm not going to be satisfied where people say to me, oh, these rules may mean that would never happen. I want people to be able to say, that cannot happen, not that wouldn't happen, because there's a very subtle difference. I'll just finish with this. The Chief Minister in his very opening remarks used the three words policy, strategy and delivery. And while it's very clear to me who sets the policy and who is responsible for the delivery, I'd just like the Chief Minister in his summing up to tell us a little bit more about the implementation of strategy and who would be responsible for taking that on board. Thank you.
Deputy Labby.
Yes, I supported Deputy Bree in the previous vote because I've done that with scrutiny chairs for the last 3.5 years. I believe that they have a lot of responsibility and not so much power, and that's uncomfortable and difficult position to be in. So I've always supported them when they've made their requests. But like Deputy Bree, I'm not unsupportive of the Chief Minister in a lot of what he's asking for here. I think we have to go with him on the changes to the Chief Executive Officer, and I can see where he's coming from on that, and I can see the benefits. So on the one hand, I'm quite gung-ho with these propositions. On the other hand, I'm aware of the seismic shift in the balance of power, and that's potentially terrifying. But I suppose I'm gung-ho because so often I feel in this assembly that I spend a long time in it, and I'm not going to say that it's a waste of time, although it's a phrase that we use a lot sometimes after a debate. And no debate is a waste of time because it's interesting to air these things and important to do it. But sometimes one does feel one spends a lot of time in here in an unproductive way or with an unproductive result. And the very first time I felt that was on the second sitting of the Assembly when we spent 2 days or more voting in each minister and having an election for each job. And really, it was an exercise in complete and utter futility. Because quite rightly, although it's good sport to try and get somebody else in that isn't the choice of the Chief Minister, in all reality, it was never part of the Clothier proposals, I understand, that the floor of the Assembly elects the ministers. And I can see why, I think it was a proposition by former Senator Sivray, I can see why moving from the presidents of committees was a bit terrifying and moving to this ministerial system, and I can see why that was brought in and that was a product of its time. But is it useful now? Is it right that we elect a Chief Minister and we trust him to lead a government and he can't choose his government and bring his complete slate back to us? Say, these are the guys and women I want to work with. And I think we should consider that very seriously. So in some ways, I want to go further than the Chief Minister is proposing. And I can absolutely see the need for him to be able to shuffle the pack, reshuffle the pack. And I also believe he should be able to drop ministers and reappoint new ministers, just as the Prime Minister in the UK does. Because if he's got a minister that is underperforming or not performing as he expected, and he's forced to reshuffle his pack, where does he hide the one who's not so good, the one who's forcing the reshuffle? Look, we don't go. Every political career ends in disaster, or I'm misquoting somebody, but you don't. You have to take political responsibility and know that you have it for a finite time, and it's about you doing your best, and if you succeed, that's great, and if you don't, you have to take the responsibility for that, and you have to fall. That's what happens in politics. It's not about you, actually, and your ego. It's about the people we serve. And if we're not, throughout, in spite of our best efforts, if we're not regarded, if we're not perceived as being good enough, we have to take that on the chin. That's part of the job. And we have to drop, and we have to see that somebody is replaced. So I as I say, feel that we could go further, seize this opportunity to make more sense of this whole system. But, and funnily enough, the thing that really irks me the most, and I hope the Chief Minister might listen to this, in his proposals is a rather minor one, people might think, in Part 6, which feels like a good idea at the time, in that reducing the days from 21 to 19, where is the day we elect the Chief Minister, feels like we're bringing that further forward, nearer to the elections, because it's 2.5 weeks, don't forget, from the general election to when we elect our Chief Minister. It's a long time. So on the face of it, 19 days brings it a little bit closer. In reality, it's Monday, June the 4th, which is the day that it's supposed to be. That's the day that we've got in our diaries as the first sitting of the States after the general election, and that is 19 days after the general. So we're not actually gaining anything. That's the day we're going to meet anyway. So, but what the Chief Minister wants to do is then put in, instead of 2 days, after that morning, 2 days, and then we have the elections for the ministers, he wants a 5-day gap. So that pushes everything a week later. And we have in our diaries, we've known for months that the state sittings are June the 4th, then Tuesday and Wednesday is free, and it's the time that the Chief Minister has his discussions with potential ministers, and then the Thursday and Friday we sit for, if we're going to continue with the election of ministers, that's when we sit for that. And though that Thursday and Friday would go, and then it moves to new days, Monday and Tuesday, for the election of ministers, and goodness knows what that does then as the knock-on, if it takes longer, to the Thursday and Friday that's slated in for election of chairs of scrutiny panels. And I do feel it is wrong to change the diary in that way, change the sittings. Now, I understand, I guess, that the Chief Minister probably wanted to bring it earlier, but couldn't, because the Royal Court is booked for the swearing in on Monday the 4th of June. But I would ask him to reconsider this, because I do think it's unfair. We take our days that we're at the beginning of the session, when we're told these states days, we put them in our diary, they're sacrosanct, they're sacred, and then to change that with only a matter of months to go, and it'll be even later before we know, I think that's unfair to do that to people, and I think it's wrong, and I think that is too late to do that. So I would ask the Chief Minister to look at that again, if he wouldn't mind, and in return for that, he's going to get my support. And even I think we should seriously consider whether we should give the Chief Minister who we elect, and let's hope there is an election, and please, candidates for Chief Minister sitting in this House or sitting out and wanting to stand, if you're going to say you're going to stand for Chief Minister, please do so. Please let us have the election. I think it's important, and no deals beforehand. I understand why. I'm not casting aspersions, but I do think it was a shame, and I think we should have that election for Chief Minister. I think that's really important. But once we've done that, let him choose his team and get on with it, with perhaps the proviso that he can't have 22, maybe he has an executive of 20, so it makes them just that little bit more easy to bring a vote of no confidence in. It makes it just that little bit more easy with the numbers to bring down the government if they're not performing in the way they should. Thank you, sir.
Does any other member wish to speak on the principles? Deputy Lafondre.
Hopefully, just briefly, sir. To an extent, I want to reiterate the comments from Deputy Bree and actually possibly even the Chief Minister earlier. Because I think we all do wish to see a change in the silo mentality side. And as I've made it very clear, I have great hopes for the new Chief Executive, and we will no doubt be looking to see him deliver. And I speak as not only as a politician, but also as a taxpayer. My concern is, so broadly speaking, I'm on the review panel, sir, and I'll be abstaining on the principles, because I think that's probably the way I'm going to do it. My one concern, I've expressed this everywhere else as well, and I just want to put this on record, to talk people through, is this issue around states-aided independent bodies. Now, this is defined in the articles, but I want to go to the principles, sir. I think it's quite important, because if this is called in by scrutiny, and if scrutiny want to send it to, if members are of the view it's got to be the 20th of March or whatever, if it is the 20th of March, scrutiny have got 2 weeks. Because if they want to bring any amendments to, that's the lodging period. And that is almost impossible. And I just make that point, and the reason I want to make that point, I want to identify this issue, I just run through as an example of the complexities we're dealing with. So, state-aided independent body is basically anyone who gets £1 from the states. Okay? Doesn't matter who it is. Now, the second point is that the principal accountable officer has a variety of functions. One is ensuring that resources, I will caveat this, of states' bodies and states' funds, which might be slightly different, are used economically, efficiently and effectively. And he can also determine the functions of accountable officers. And basically, somewhere else in the law, for anybody who receives £1, potentially they can have an accountable officer appointed over them. The accountable officer has to be a state's employee. So we don't as yet have a list. I've understood there have been some discussions, and obviously I was away at half term, about this, but as a matter of law, potentially that means if you get £1 from the states, when this law goes through, you will be subject to control. And as I've said, I don't have a problem if it's SOJDC or Andium or Ports, because they are former designated bodies. But it's anybody who got £1 from the states. And that, I think, raises a whole range of issues around independence. As I said, I don't have any issues at all with the present Chief Executive. But my job is to think about the person who replaces him or the person after that. And it's about the checks and balances there in terms of what is defined in the law versus what perhaps financial directions say. Financial directions can be changed at any point. So what one then got to look at is what are the controls and safety measures on there to ensure that the right checks and balances are in place, and it's not about actually body X who received more than £1 from us whenever in this period, you disagree with me, tough, you're going to do precisely what I tell you to, because otherwise we invoke the controls of this law to make you do what you want. And I have been in a position many years ago, pre-politics, when a politician was actually probably my first exposure, other than through family, to politics, when a politician was thumping on the table saying, we want you to do X, and making all sorts of threats. And so it can happen. And if you are an independent body, notionally set up in the honorary style of this island or whatever, that potentially leaves a lot of worries in my mind about the state and central state having lots of interventions. For things like, as I said, Andium, Ports, Visit Jersey, all those sort of things, I don't have a problem with that principle. I am worried about it going wider. And I think that's, for example, one area we very clearly need some clarity. And it's all very well having assurances, but as actually assurances are not what is written into the law. I'll just make that point for the purposes, that's just one of my thought processes, and that's why we have to get our head around this, because this is important. The issue around silos is critical. I think I would say almost everyone in this room, in this chamber, I would have thought, in this assembly, is supportive of breaking down that silo mentality. And we've all had that frustration the Chief Minister referred to much earlier. It's how we get there and what are the checks and balances in there. But what I will say, and I'm glad Deputy Bree is calling it in, is that there does need to be time, because it is a complicated area. It's bound to be. And that note, so I'm afraid I will be abstaining, mainly because I've expressed a view, but that's on that aspect. On anything else, I shall wait until we've had the evidence.
Does any other member wish to speak on the principles? If not, I call on the Chief Minister.
Thank you very much indeed, sir. Just before I sum up, I just wanted to correct something I said in the earlier debate, where I said I'd written to the panels on the 22nd of November. I've now found the copies of the letters in my bundle here, and it was actually the 24th of November, not the 22nd, so it was 2 days later than the 22nd of November. It's just important that I corrected that. So I don't want to speak for a long time. I'm very grateful for members, what I think is broad support for the principles, removing the silo mentality, creating a proper accountability structure. I've heard exactly what members have said about other particular parts of this proposal. It's been interesting to hear members of opposite opinions about the ability to reshuffle and present a slate that where the panel have got concerns, other members want to take a step further. So perhaps I can say that during the chairman's speech, I think I liked his thoughts as an independent member better than I did his thoughts as the chairman of the panel. But we'll deal with that throughout this process. So it was the Deputy of St Martin that said, let's get on and work together to improve these articles, and I absolutely intend to do that. So there is some detail to work through. It is important that we work it through, but it's important that we do it in a timely manner so that if it's at all possible, and I believe it is, these decisions can be made and we can have a new system up and running, ready for the next government. So I thank members, next assembly. I thank members for their contributions, and I look forward to working with them and with the scrutiny panel to refine the articles over the course of the coming weeks so that we can agree it in due course, sir. Thank you.
The panel's been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats.
Are we voting for everything on block?
It's the principles.
Thank you, sir.
I was about to say the vote is on the principles of the draft law in front of us, and I ask the greffier to open the voting. If all members have had the opportunity to cast their votes, I ask the greffier to close the voting. I can announce that the principles have been adopted, 32 votes per, 5 votes contrary, with 2 abstentions.
Those voting contre, Deputy Southern, Tadia, Higgins, Mesick and Bree, and Deputy Lafondre and the Deputy of St Mary abstained.
Deputy Lafondre, you've said your panel will call this piece of legislation in.
Yes, so actually, technically, it's the review panel of which
Technically,
Deputy...
it's the scrutiny
yes.
panel.
Okay, sorry, so then, yes, we'll be calling it in, so thank you.
And when would the date be for it to return to the Assembly?
Sorry, so I wasn't expecting the one being asked on this. We're going to need a long period of time, sir, I think, so that's the trouble. We've only got 2 sittings left, haven't we? Or was it 3 sittings?
To be helpful, there are 3 sittings left. You're allowed up to 4 sittings, and the 4th sitting will be the 26th of June.
I know, sir. Can I give us do I have to give a submission now, or does it have to be? Can I do it tomorrow morning? So I'd like to confer with the actual panel.
I think it'd be possible to do tomorrow morning.
Okay,
we did it as the first business tomorrow.
Okay, thank you, sir.
If somebody proposed the adjournment. Adjournment's proposed. The Assembly is adjourned till 9:30 tomorrow.